The burly humanoid figure had silver lightning revolving all around his body, and after steadying himself, he raised his head, revealing himself to be a middle-aged man with a head of red hair and a heavy beard. The man had a square face and a huge hook nose that resembled a falcon's beak. There was a pair of crimson wings on his back that were crackling with arcs of lightning, and he resembled the incarnation of the lightning god. However, at this moment, his face was quite pale, and there were many charred sections on the silver robe that he was wearing. One of his sleeves had been completely torn off to reveal a bare arm. This man was an early body integration cultivator, and he seemed to be in an even sorrier state than Han Li. As soon as he appeared, he immediately turned to look behind himself with a panicked expression. As soon as Han Li caught sight of the man, his heart jolted with shock, and he couldn't help but exclaim, "It's you." The man immediately turned to Han Li upon hearing his voice, and a shocked look also appeared on his face at the sight of Han Li. Right at this moment, a thought seemed to have occurred to Han Li, and a hint of excitement appeared on his face. In the next instant, he rose to his feet on his flying carriage, then appeared behind Dal in a wraith-like manner. Han Li laid a hand onto Dal's shoulder, and she was instantly drawn up his sleeve as a ball of white light. Immediately thereafter, spiritual light flashed from beneath Han Li's feet, and the speed of his flying carriage instantly doubled as he hurtled over to just over 1,000 feet away from the burly man. The burly man swept his spiritual sense toward Han Li before asking with furrowed brows, "Han Li, why are you here, and why are you in such a bad condition?" The burly man clearly recognized him. "Shouldn't I be the one asking you that, Brother Lei? You look to be in an even worse situation than I am. Are you being hunted by someone as well?" Han Li asked with a wry smile. "HMPH, I have indeed encountered some trouble, but my situation is still better than yours. I can see that you've reached the mid-body integration stage since we last met. How did you exhaust your magic power to such a degree? You're not being hunted by Grand Ascension stage beings, are you?" the burly man replied. "I am indeed being hunted by Grand Ascension stage beings. You seem to be really panicked despite your ability to create lightning formations. Could it be that you're also being hunted by Grand Ascension stage beings?" Han Li asked as he raised an eyebrow. He, looks like we're both in the same boat. Who are you being pursued by? Why are there suddenly so many Grand Ascension stage beings around?" the burly man asked. A peculiar look appeared on Han Li's face. "Why ask a question you already know the answer to, Brother Lei? Our human race and the nearby few races are currently in the midst of a devilish tribulation, so I'm obviously being hunted by beings from the Elder Devil race. Are you unaware of all this?" The burly man immediately drew a sharp breath upon hearing this. "Devilish tribulation? Could it be that you're being pursued by a sacred ancestor? I just came out of seclusion several months ago. How am I supposed to know about this?" "I see, it's no wonder that you haven't heard about the devilish tribulation then. I'm being pursued by several sacred ancestor clones, all of which possess late-body integration stage powers, so I naturally had no choice but to flee." "Are you being pursued by a sacred ancestor clone as well, Brother Lei?" Han Li asked. "I don't know if they're sacred ancestors, but they are indeed able to control extremely pure true devil chi. One of them uses a cultivation art that can suppress my 5 lightning physique, and as for the other one, I still haven't been able to ascertain her level of power. Perhaps she's also a sacred ancestor clone," the burly man replied in an ambiguous manner. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. It was quite clear that Lei Yunzi was hiding something, but he couldn't be bothered to pry any further now. Instead, he quickly changed the subject. "We're quite fortunate to have bumped into one another. Do you still recall the lightning formation that you introduced to me when we last met, if we join forces?" Lei Yunzi's eyes immediately lit up with elation upon hearing this. "Ah, you're talking about the dual lightning formation, right? How could I have forgotten something like that? Haha, there's a good chance we'll be able to escape from our pursuers now. In that case, let's not waste any more time. Where's this fragrance coming from?" Han Li faltered mid-sentence as he suddenly caught a whiff of a special scent in the air. Lei Yunzi's face paled even further as he hurriedly yelled, "Crap, those two have tracked me down again. Come to me, fellow Taoist Han. I'll get you out of here first." Han Li was also quite startled to hear this, and his flying carriage immediately shot forth toward Lei Yunzi as a streak of azure light. After just 2 flashes, Han Li appeared beside Lei Yunzi, then stowed the flying carriage away with a wave of his hand. Meanwhile, Lei Yunzi made a hand seal with an urgent look on his face, and countless arcs of silver lightning erupted out of his body and crimson wings to instantly form a brand new lightning formation. A resounding thunderclap rang out, and lightning flashed like countless silver snakes to inundate both Han Li and Lei Yunzi. However, right at this moment, spatial fluctuations suddenly erupted in the air above the lightning formation, and a pink floral tree emerged out of thin air. The tree was around 1,000 feet tall, and it was releasing an indescribably fragrant scent. The tree rustled up above, and countless pink flowers descended from it, then transformed into a burst of pink light that swept downward. Strangely enough, the pink light appeared to be moving very slowly, but it instantly covered a distance of several thousand feet and reached the lightning formation down below. There's not enough time, dodge. The pink light was extremely alluring and beautiful, but Lei Yunzi was appraising it as if it were a ghastly apparition. He immediately abandoned his lightning formation and flapped his wings vigorously, vanishing into thin air as an arc of lightning. This was the first time that Han Li had seen this pink tree, but his heart jolted at the sight of the evasive measures that Lei Yunzi had taken, and he also shot forth out of the lightning formation as a thread of azure and white light. The thread of light covered a distance of over 2,000 feet in a single flash, while the giant lightning formation was instantly snuffed out by the pink light. This pink light seemed to possess the ability to repress the power of lightning. The azure and white light faded, and Han Li reappeared before drawing a sharp breath as he cast his gaze back to where the lightning formation had been just a moment ago. He turned to Lei Yunzi with a stunned look in his eyes. "Brother Lei, are these? Letter 1D5F3, letter 1D69B, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D556, letter 1D6A0, letter 1D6AT, letter 1D6AC, letter 1D698, letter 1D46. That's right, these two are my pursuers. They're tracking me down faster and faster now," Lei Yunzi replied as he forced a smile onto his own face. Han Li's heart sank upon hearing this, but he could only steel himself and focus his attention on the floral tree projection. However, aside from the projection, nothing else appeared in the nearby space. Of course, neither Lei Yunzi nor Han Li were going to be fooled by such measly tricks. They merely remained on the spot and refrained from doing anything rash. "Hee, why aren't you running away this time? Could it be that you've given up and are willing to hand that thing over?" As soon as this voice trailed off, a hideous black-robed man appeared beside the floral tree before instantly turning toward Han Li and Lei Yunzi. "Oh, and who might you be?" the hideous man interrogated as he appraised Han Li with a vicious look in his eyes. "You're telling me this man is making you run for your life?" Han Li asked as he raised an eyebrow. "Of course not. Aside from him, there's also me." An indifferent female voice suddenly rang out from above the floral tree projection. Immediately thereafter, pink light flashed erratically from the surface of the projection, and it crumbled away into specks of spiritual light, revealing a barefoot woman in a white dress in its place. The woman had a set of peerlessly beautiful facial features, and she was standing atop a giant pink flower. Han Li was instantly struck by a sense of asphyxiation at the sight of the woman, and his expression darkened significantly. He was immediately able to ascertain that this woman was either a Grand Ascension stage being or a clone of such a being. Otherwise, there was no way that he would be struck by such a strong sense of foreboding. The woman glanced at Han Li and Lei Yunzi, and a mysterious smile appeared on her face. "Have you changed your mind, fellow Taoist? You've led me on this chase for over a month just over a mere spirit flower. That celestial cloud flower is useless to you. How about you hand it over to me and I'll spare your life?" the woman proposed, much to Lei Yunzi's rage and chagrin. "HMPH, the celestial cloud flower is an extremely precious spirit item. I may have no use for it now, but there will definitely come a day when it'll be useful to me. If you want me to hand it over to you, then you're going to be disappointed," Lei Yunzi harumphed coldly in response. As opposed to being enraged by this, the woman remained calm and remarked, "It seems that you're very confident in your lightning formations." Why wouldn't I be confident? If you have the ability to catch me, then how have I managed to escape from you for over a month?" Lei Yunzi chuckled coldly, seemingly having cast aside all of his wariness toward the woman. The hideous black-robed man immediately flared up with rage. "Insolence! How dare you speak to Mistress Bao Hua like that?" "Shut up, you nosy lapdog. If you didn't have that woman to protect you, I could kill you with ease," Lei Yunzi said in a cold, derisive voice. The hideous man was enraged even further upon hearing this, and he let loose a ferocious snarl as he prepared to pounce toward Lei Yunzi, only for the woman to stop him. Stand down, Hai. You are indeed no match for this fellow Taoist. The man did as he was told, but an indignant look appeared on his face. But Mistress Bao Hua, are you opposing my orders? The woman asked as she raised an eyebrow. I wouldn't dare. Forgive me for my mindless transgression, Hai hurriedly replied in a panicked manner. Bao Hua's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer before she warned in an indifferent voice, Don't let it happen again. Hai hurriedly gave an affirmative response. Han Li was appraising everything from the side, and a hint of bewilderment flashed through his eyes at the sight of the black-robed man. This was clearly the first time he had ever seen this man, but for some reason, his aura was rather familiar. Han Li felt as if he had sensed this aura from afar in the past, and that naturally made him rather perplexed. However, this clearly wasn't the right time to be pondering something like this. His top priority now was to escape from this place with Lei Yunzi. With his understanding of Lei Yunzi's abilities, he wasn't overly concerned. As long as Lei Yunzi had made preparations in advance, he could teleport both of them away in an instant. Even if the woman were a grand ascension stage being, she wouldn't be able to stop them. Otherwise, Lei Yunzi wouldn't be facing such an unfathomably powerful enemy with so much confidence. Just as these thoughts were racing through Han Li's mind, the woman spoke again. You invented that lightning formation technique yourself, right, fellow Taoist Lei? The technique is very profound, and only someone with a 5 lightning physique like you will be able to maximize its power. I'm assuming the technique is also the source of your confidence. So what if it is? Lei Yunzi asked, wondering what the woman was trying to say. Your lightning teleportation formations incorporate the powers of space and lightning to allow you to teleport tens of thousands of kilometers at a time. But it's not that easy to combine those two types of powers. You only managed to invent the technique by chance while referencing a certain secret technique, right? Bao Hua continued. Lei Yunzi's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, but he remained silent and continued to appraise the woman with a cold expression. The woman chuckled before continuing. Coincidentally, the abilities I've cultivated also incorporate the powers of lightning and space, so I'm very well versed in these two types of powers as well. Lei Yunzi finally couldn't help but ask, What are you trying to say? I'm sure you've already noticed that it's taking me less and less time to track you down. Perhaps after a few more times, I'll have your lightning formation completely figured out, and it'll be completely ineffective against me. I've already planted a tracking mark in your body, so unless you can teleport to millions of kilometers away at once, it'll only be a matter of time before I hunt you down. I'm telling you all this now as I don't want to waste time, so I'm giving you one last chance. Otherwise, I have a treasure that just so happens to be missing a few body integration stage souls. I wouldn't mind taking yours to power the treasure, the woman said in a calm voice. Lei Yunzi's face paled even further upon hearing this, and a hesitant look appeared on his face. Bao Hua had no intention of hurrying him into a decision, choosing instead to turn her attention toward Han Li. The woman's eyes were as clear as water, but Han Li was suddenly struck by a bone-chilling sensation, as if he had been laid entirely bare before her. This was clearly a sign that the woman's spiritual sense was far more powerful than his. Han Li immediately activated his great development technique and spirit refinement technique at once, circulating his spiritual sense all throughout his own body, and only then was he able to just barely ward off this unsettling feeling. However, just that brief moment of scrutiny was enough for Han Li's back to be drenched in cold sweat. His spiritual sense was already close to that of the average Grand Ascension cultivator, which meant that this woman was most likely an extremely powerful being, even among Grand Ascension stage beings. However, what happened next made Han Li even more astonished. A peculiar look suddenly appeared on the woman's face as she said, So, you were the one who killed my subordinates in the Golden Devil mountain ranges and took my profound heavenly fortune blade fragment. You've been using my treasure for quite a few years now. Isn't it about time you returned it to me? Han Li's heart jolted with shock, and a thought immediately occurred to him, but he forced a smile onto his own face and replied, What are you talking about, Senior? I believe this is the first time we've ever met. Looks like you're unwilling to return it to me. So be it, I'll take it back from you myself then, the woman said in an emotionless manner before waving a hand toward Han Li. All of a sudden, a streak of purple light shot out of Han Li's sleeve. It was none other than that purple blade fragment. With nothing more than a casual wave of her hand, the woman had instantly severed Han Li's spiritual sense connection with the blade segment before drawing it back toward herself. Han Li's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and he reflexively made a grabbing motion, conjuring up a massive azure hand to catch the blade fragment. However, the blade fragment merely vanished into thin air in a flash, leaving the huge azure hand to grab onto nothing. Immediately thereafter, purple light flashed between two of the woman's fingers, and the purple blade segment silently emerged. Han Li's expression darkened even further, and by now, he had recalled where he had last encountered that black-robed man. He was one of the powerful devilish beasts that had been present in the Golden Devil mountain ranges. At the time, Han Li had only detected the devilish beast with his spiritual sense on a fleeting basis, which was why his recollection of the beast had been so vague. He had indeed obtained that blade fragment from inside the Golden Devil mountain ranges, so this woman was most likely the sacred ancestor lurking within those mountain ranges. Han Li was very reluctant to part with that powerful treasure, but this wasn't the time to be dwelling on something like that. It really is the profound heavenly fortune blade fragment. I've had this treasure for so long that even I've forgotten how long it's been with me. Even if you disguise its aura, there's no way you can fool me. Hi, you don't have a good life-saving treasure yet. You can have this blade fragment. Much to everyone's surprise, the woman tossed the blade fragment toward the black-robed man. The black-robed man reflexively caught the treasure and faltered momentarily before immediately extending an elated bow toward the woman. "Thank you for your kindness, Mistress Bao Hua." Han Li was naturally quite frustrated to see this, but he couldn't do anything about it. To his surprise, the woman didn't pry any further into this matter. Instead, she turned back toward Lei Yunzi and asked, "Have you made a decision? Are you prepared to suffer for all of eternity over a useless spirit medicine?" Lei Yunzi shuddered slightly upon hearing this, and the hesitant look faded from his face as he sighed. "If you had said this to me any earlier than this, then I would have had no choice but to hand over the flower. However..." Lei Yunzi suddenly flapped his wings and made a hand seal as he spoke. A resounding thunderclap rang out as countless arcs of silver lightning erupted from within his body. In the next instant, he vanished on the spot before reappearing beside Han Li within a huge lightning formation that was several tens of feet in size. "Go," he yelled, and Han Li flew into the formation without any hesitation as soon as it appeared. The black-robed man let loose an enraged roar upon seeing this, and he made a grabbing motion to summon a giant black axe before bringing it down viciously toward the lightning formation. A huge axe projection erupted forth, threatening to tear through the space in its path as it hurtled through the air. However, it was already too late. The black axe projection was indeed very powerful, but Lei Yunzi had already seized the initiative. A cold harumph rang out, and spatial fluctuations erupted from within the lightning formation, following which he and Han Li abruptly vanished amid a flash of silver lightning. The black axe projection tore the lightning formation apart, but Han Li and Lei Yunzi were already nowhere to be seen at that point. Bao Hua didn't stop the black-robed man from attacking, but she showed no intention of stepping in either. She merely heaved a faint sigh before closing her eyes as if she were sensing something. An indignant look appeared on his face at the sight of his failed attack, but he didn't dare to say anything in fear of disrupting Bao Hua. After a long while, Bao Hua reopened her eyes and said, "I'll have his lightning formation completely figured after 5 or 6 more times at most. I've already narrowed down a few possible teleportation destinations. Let's go to them one by one." "Yes, Mistress Bao Hua, forgive me for prying, but how did your treasure fall into the hands of that man?" Hai asked in a curious manner. "One of my profound heavenly fortune blade fragments was stolen by that devilish ape in the Golden Devil mountain ranges. When I awakened and tracked down the ape's hiding place, it had already been slain, so the blade fragment was naturally taken by the one who had killed the ape. During that period of time, many heavenly cloud beings had ventured into the mountain ranges, so it had to be one of them that killed it. At the time, I had an agreement with the grand elders of the 13 heavenly cloud races, so I couldn't scour through their territory to recover the treasure. Never did I think that it would have fallen into the hands of a human. I don't know how he managed to get into the Golden Devil mountain ranges back then, but there's certainly no reason not to take the treasure back from him," Bao Hua explained in a calm manner. "I see. I faced some of those heavenly cloud beings in the past, but I didn't think that there was someone among them capable of killing that body integration stage devilish ape," Hai said, as a hint of lingering fear flashed through his eyes. "All right, that's enough talk about that matter. Let's focus on securing the celestial cloud flower now. Setting aside everything else, That flower alone would be able to repress some of my injuries, so we can't let it slip away. Also, the results of my divination indicated that the spirit medicine I'm searching for seems to be in this area as well. Make sure to keep an eye out, Hai. If you can help me find the spirit medicine I need so I can recover all of my powers, I'll be sure to reward you handsomely, Bao Hua promised. Rest assured, mistress, I'll do everything in my power to help you track down that spirit medicine. It's a pity that you weren't able to determine exactly what this medicine is through your divination. Otherwise, things would be a lot easier, Hai replied. I've dabbled in some divination techniques, but I'm not exactly well versed in this area. Unfortunately, both of my most trusted subordinates, Yun and Long, have perished in battle long ago. Otherwise, they'd be able to do all of this in my stead, Bao Hua said as a hint of dejection flashed through her eyes. A solemn look appeared on Hai's face upon hearing this. I've heard of Master Yun and Master Long as well. They're not sacred ancestors, but the abilities they possess make them a threat even to the average sacred ancestor. In particular, Master Yun is renowned as the second-best divination master in our holy realm. Only Master Chuan Guang, who specializes in divination techniques, is superior in this area by a sliver. So even you know of them. That's not all that surprising. They truly were once just as renowned as the average sacred ancestor, Bao Hua said as a reminiscent look appeared in her eyes. Hai offered a respectful smile, but didn't dare to speak any further on the matter. Not long after that, Bao Hua set her sights on the task at hand again. Let's go. If we don't set off now, we might have some trouble tracking down that human. Hai naturally had no objections to this. He gave an affirmative response while extending a respectful bow, then instantly flew onto the giant flower as well, standing around 10 feet behind Bao Hua. Bao Hua swept a sleeve through the air, and the giant flower beneath her feet rotated on the spot, releasing countless bursts of pink light, as well as a peculiar fragrance. The pink light then faded, and the giant flower was nowhere to be seen. After that, the giant flower appeared in a few more places, only to disappear immediately thereafter each time. Letter 1D4 BB, letter 1D6 33, letter 1D6 26, letter 1D6 26, letter 1D6 38, letter 21 2F, letter 1D6 24, letter 1D4 5C, letter 1D6 2E. When the giant pink flower appeared in the air above a dense forest around 4 hours later, Bao Hua suddenly let loose a faint cry of surprise. Immediately thereafter, Hai and Bao Hua re-emerged from within the flower. Have you tracked down those two, mistress? Hai asked in an elated manner. No, but we seem to have bumped into a few unexpected guests, Bao Hua replied as she cast her gaze into the distance. Guests? Hai was naturally quite perplexed, and he also hurriedly cast his gaze toward the same direction, but saw nothing for his efforts. However, in the next instant, spiritual light flashed in that direction, and 2 balls of white light appeared without any warning before arriving in the nearby space, traveling at an incredible speed. Those are the all-encompassing plate and stone devil hall, Hai immediately exclaimed upon catching sight of the 2 massive objects within the balls of white light, and a peculiar look appeared on his face. Bao Hua was also appraising the 2 treasures with a complex expression, but there was a distinctly cold look in her eyes. The people within the 2 treasures had naturally also noticed Bao Hua, and their expressions changed drastically as they hurriedly brought their treasures to a halt. Immediately thereafter, spatial fluctuations erupted, and 4 humanoid figures emerged. They were none other than the clones of Yuan Cha and Zhu Guang, and they were all appraising Bao Hua with strained expressions. Sister Bao Hua, I didn't expect to meet you here, Yuan Cha said in a rather stiff and uncomfortable voice. Yuan Cha, I didn't think I'd see you again either, especially in the spirit realm. Looks like the sacred sacrifice has already begun. However, I don't think it's appropriate for you to refer to me as sister, Bao Hua said in a calm voice. Yuan Cha's face immediately turned deathly pale upon hearing this. The 3 Zhu Guang clones were already cursing their bad luck as soon as they identified Bao Hua, and as Bao Hua cast her frosty gaze toward them, they could only force smiles onto their faces while of them said in a respectful manner, Zhu Guang pays his respects to Mistress Bao Hua. HMPH, you seem to have become more powerful. It's quite impressive that you were able to cultivate so many clones. I just so happen to be missing a few servants. You 3 will suffice, Bao Hua said in a cold voice. The 3 Zhu Guang clones' faces also turned deathly pale upon hearing this. They glanced at one another and seemed to have instantly arrived at a decision, immediately hurtling back into the jade plate as 3 bursts of black chi. A clear ringing sound erupted from the all-encompassing plate, and black and white chi erupted from the treasure in a frenzy, forming a giant Techa diagram that vanished in a flash. The all-encompassing plate is indeed a very powerful treasure, but unfortunately, your true body isn't here, and you're not the owner of this treasure. Don't you think it's too naive of you to harbor hopes of getting away right under my nose? Bao Hua's expression darkened as she made a grabbing motion with one hand. All of a sudden, one of the 7 scorching suns in the sky abruptly began to expand at a rapid rate. The sun warped and blurred slightly, following which a white sun with a diameter in excess of 10,000 feet emerged out of thin air. The white sun radiated scintillating light, as well as scorching heat that instantly raised the surrounding temperature by more than tenfold. It was as if she had truly drawn a sun to her from afar. Great illusionary sun technique, Xianxia exclaimed as her expression changed drastically. Bao Hua cast a cold glance toward her, but remained silent as she pointed a finger at the giant sun in the air. A resounding boom rang out as the sun slowly rotated, releasing countless white threads of light that pierced through space and encompassed the entire area in sight. Xianxia raised a hand to summon an antiquated black mirror, which transformed into a translucent light barrier that shielded her within. The light barrier managed to keep the threads of light at bay, but judging from the strained expression on Xianxia's face, it was clear that she wouldn't be able to keep this up for long. Over 10,000 feet away, the threads of light pierced through space in a certain area, and a resounding boom rang out, following which a giant jade plate tumbled out of thin air. The surrounding threads of light all changed directions and converged toward the jade plate in a torrential downpour. It was as if they had a mind of their own. The entire jade plate was instantly surrounded by countless threads of light, and it was on the verge of being inundated. A roar of fury from Zhu Guang rang out, and the jade plate rotated on the spot as it released black and white chi in a frenzy, forming a giant Techa diagram again that managed to temporarily keep the oncoming attacks at bay. Bao Hua remained completely expressionless upon seeing this, but she immediately made a grabbing motion toward the jade plate, and white light flashed, following which a giant hand that was over 1,000 feet in size emerged out of thin air. The hand spread its 5 fingers, and scorching white flames were ignited all over its surface as it grabbed toward the jade plate down below. Another roar of fury rang out from within the jade plate as the Techa diagram detached itself from the jade plate, then expanded to around twice its original size as it hurtled toward the massive hand. A loud buzzing sound then rang out from the jade plate itself, and the nearby space twisted and blurred as it prepared to teleport away again. As soon as the giant Techa diagram came into contact with the giant hand, the former immediately began to tremor violently before being crushed into pieces as the massive hand's fingers closed around it. The scorching white flames instantly incinerated the fragments of the Techa diagram into nothingness, then swept downward to encompass the jade plate as well. The 3 Zhu Guang clones were naturally very alarmed by this, and 3 different voices rang out in unison, begging for mercy and cursing Bao Hua at the same time. However, the white flames didn't falter in the slightest, and the pristine white jade plate was almost instantly turned into a scorching crimson color in the face of the fierce flames. Once the giant hand grabbed firmly onto the jade plate, 5 white fiery dragons flew out of its fingertips before revolving around the treasure, and the jade plate began to melt away layer by layer. No! A cry of fury and alarm rang out from within the jade plate, following which a miniature pagoda that was only around several inches in size flew out. The pagoda then transformed into a rainbow projection that was over 1,000 feet tall in a flash, and the 5 fiery dragons were forcibly kept at bay. The dragons were still thrashing violently and blasting flames out of their mouths, but the rainbow pagoda projection remained firm and resolute. On top of that, rainbow light flashed from the surface of the projection, and it absorbed a lot of the white flames to bolster itself. However, right at this moment, the giant sun up above began to crash down like a massive mountain at Bao Hua's behest. The rainbow pagoda projection was indeed extremely profound, but there was no way that the 3 Zhu Guang clones could unleash the treasure's full power. Thus, in the face of the massive sun, it only lasted several seconds before crumbling away into pieces. The shattered specks of rainbow light converged to form a miniature pagoda again, but on this occasion, it had completely lost its luster. The massive white sun continued to descend, and the giant plate had no time to react before it was also inundated. Within the scintillating white light, the jade plate began to melt again, and just before it was completely melted into nothingness, 3 streaks of crimson light shot forth out of the jade plate, only to be swept up by the scorching white flames and completely incinerated amid 3 howls of anguish. These 3 clones were each as powerful as a late body integration stage being, but they were completely powerless in the face of Bao Hua. This was due to the fact that they were merely clones while Bao Hua's true body was present, and the fact that her great illusionary sun technique repressed most devilish cultivation arts also contributed to this. Otherwise, even though Bao Hua was once vastly renowned in the Elder Devil realm, there was no way she'd be able to kill the 3 Zhu Guang clones so easily in her severely weakened state. Almost at the exact same moment as the deaths of the 3 Zhu Guang clones, another Zhu Guang clone was seated on a stone chair at the center of a giant devilish pagoda near Deep Heaven City. He was currently listening to a few body integration stage devilish lords report the latest exploits of the devilish army. Not only had the devilish army wiped out all of the large human settlements outside of Deep Heaven City, even some of the smaller major families and sects had been eradicated. Now, it was time to begin planning how they were going to completely surround Deep Heaven City. Just as Zhu Guang was listening intently to the ideas being offered by his subordinates, his expression suddenly changed drastically, and he abruptly rose to his feet as he let loose an enraged roar. Impossible! How could the 3 of them have been killed all at once? The other devilish lords were naturally given quite a fright by his abrupt, furious outburst, and they all glanced at one another with bewildered expressions. "May I ask what happened, Master Zhu Guang?" one of the more prominent devilish lords asked in a careful manner following a brief hesitation. A series of thoughts flashed rapidly through Zhu Guang's mind, and the rage on his face quickly faded as he adopted his usual calm expression. "I sent out 3 of my guards to do something for me and planted some of my spiritual sense within them, but they screwed up. It's all right, though. I'll just send some others to get the job done." This ambiguous response left a lot more to be desired, but the other devilish lords naturally didn't dare to pry any further. As such, they could only change the subject and begin discussing their plans to surround Deep Heaven City again. As for Zhu Guang, he sat back down onto his chair with a calm expression, as if that enraged outburst really had been nothing more than a momentary loss of composure. Deep within a crimson river in the Elder Devil realm, a roar of fury also rang out without any warning. The thunderous roar caused the water in the lake to ripple violently, but all of a sudden, the voice abruptly cut off, and no further sounds could be heard. In the spirit realm, the light barrier formed by Yuan Cha's black mirror also immediately shattered as soon as the giant sun descended upon it. The scorching white flames being released by the sun swept downward without any mercy, and Yuan Cha's face paled even further as she cried for help in a panicked voice. Black light suddenly flashed from the stone hall down below, and a humanoid figure appeared behind Yuan Cha in a wraith-like manner, before raising a pair of slender hands up into the air. Letter 1D4 BB, letter 1D4 C7, letter 1D4 52, letter 1D6 26, letter 1D6 38, letter 1D4 52, letter 1D4 B8, letter 2134, letter 1D6 2E. A fist-sized golden bead flew forth, then vanished into the giant sun in a flash. An earth-shattering boom rang out, and a burst of golden light suddenly exploded within the giant sun. As it did so, a massive hole with a diameter of around 100 feet was blasted into the sun. In contrast with the white sun's mountainous size, such a hole was naturally rather insignificant, but the black humanoid figure suddenly transformed into a ball of black light. The ball of light then swept up Yuan Cha as well before flying into the hole in the sun at an incredible speed. "Liu Jai?" Bao Hua's pupils contracted slightly at the sight of the black humanoid figure, and her calm expression was replaced by one of cold fury as she made a grabbing motion downward with both hands at once. 2 flower petals detached themselves from the giant flower beneath her feet, then shot forth toward her hands. Azure light flashed from her hands, and one of the flower petals transformed into a giant green bow, while the other took on the form of a long white arrow. Bao Hua's movements appeared to be rather slow and languid as she drew the bow, but she didn't bother to aim before letting the arrow loose. As soon as the arrow left the bow, it transformed into a streak of white light that instantly vanished on the spot. Only then did the Liu Jai emerge on the other side of the giant white sun with Yuan Cha, and a sharp screeching sound immediately rang out beside her. Her heart jolted upon hearing this, and she immediately released 8 small crystalline shields amid a flash of blue light. All of the shields were of a translucent blue color, as if they had been forged from glacial ice, and they instantly appeared before Liu Jai, stacked one behind another. The sharp screeching sound abruptly cut off as the streak of white light appeared in front of the 8 shields, then vanished again in a flash. In the next instant, a string of crisp cracks rang out in rapid succession, and the 8 small shields exploded in unison. Liu Jai stumbled backward, and it could be seen that a hole as thick as a thumb had been punched through her chest. A ball of white flames then erupted from the wound before enveloping her entire body. Despite this, Liu Jai remained completely unflustered. She abruptly opened her mouth to expel a ball of blood essence, which transformed into a cloud of blood mist that quickly permeated through the air. An astonishing scene then ensued. As the blood mist came into contact with the ferocious white flames, the latter was instantly snuffed out with ease. However, Liu Jai had no time to pay any heed to her own injury as she quickly made a hand seal. Black light erupted from her body again, sweeping up Yuan Cha before hurtling away into the distance. The ball of black light quickly vanished into the distance after just a couple of flashes, leaving Bao Hua to look on with a dark expression. Right at this moment, 5 colored lights suddenly began to revolve around the stone hall that had been left behind by Liu Jai and Bao Hua, and countless runes surged forth in a frenzy to form a giant formation down below. The stone hall was situated at the center of the formation, and it was about to teleport away. A cold light flashed through Bao Hua's eyes upon seeing this. HMPH, they may have gotten away, but you two aren't going to be so lucky. As soon as her voice trailed off, the bow in her hand vanished, and she pointed a finger at the stone hall from afar. The giant sun in the air instantly transformed into a white fiery barrier that concealed the entire sky, and at the same time, another giant pink flower emerged beneath the stone hall. A streak of pink sword chi shot forth out of the flower before striking the giant formation with unerring accuracy, and the formation instantly crumbled, thereby thwarting the stone hall's attempt to teleport away. 2 low roars rang out from within the stone hall, and it split up into 2 before transforming into a pair of gray stone giants. The giants thumped their chests in a menacing display, but they were clearly extremely wary of Bao Hua and didn't dare to actually attack her. Bao Hua merely made a peculiar hand seal in a nonchalant manner upon seeing this, and a dull thump rang out as 2 pillars of translucent light erupted out of the massive flower beneath the pair of stone giants. The 2 pillars of light were as fast as lightning and reached the 2 giants in a flash. The pair of giants were naturally greatly alarmed by this, and they tried to take evasive measures, but it was already too late. The 2 pillars of light completely disregarded the protective spiritual light around them before vanishing into their bodies in a flash. The 2 of them only had a chance to cry out in shock and fury before a series of crystalline flowers appeared over every single inch of their bodies. The 2 stone giants had been instantly sealed within a layer of a mysterious crystalline substance and were completely immobilized. Bao Hua raised a hand in silence as she appraised the 2 stone giants, and white light flashed from the crystalline substance over the bodies of the giants. Immediately thereafter, the pair of giants began to rapidly shrink, and in the blink of an eye, they had been reduced to a pair of fist-sized objects that were stowed away up her sleeve. Congratulations on vanquishing those powerful enemies, mistress. Hai hurriedly rushed over to offer his congratulations. They were merely 3 clones of Zhu Guang's. They can hardly be considered as powerful enemies. In contrast, Liu Jai's 6 clones are all very important allies to her. After being struck by that sunset arrow of mine, it'll take at least 100 years for her to recover to her former level of power, Bao Hua said in an indifferent voice. Then should we give chase and kill them all? This is a very rare opportunity, Hai suggested in a careful manner. Bao Hua contemplated this suggestion momentarily before replying, "There's no need for that. Liu Jai definitely has some type of life-saving movement technique up her sleeve. Even if I were to pursue her with all my power, the chances of being able to catch her are still rather slim. My top priority now is the celestial cloud flower. If I allow the flower to slip away, then it'll be very difficult to find it again in the future. Let's go." "Yes, mistress," Hai replied in a respectful manner. Immediately thereafter, the giant flower beneath Bao Hua rotated on the spot, releasing a burst of pink light that swept up both of them before teleporting them away. Thus, peace and quiet returned to the area, and it was as if nothing had ever happened there. In a secluded valley countless kilometers away, 2 shimmering silver lightning formations of different sizes appeared in midair amid a rumbling thunderclap. The smaller of the two lightning formations was contained within the larger one, and at the center of both formations stood a pair of humanoid figures. One of them was an azure-robed young man, while the other was a burly man with a pair of crimson wings, holding a silver formation plate in each hand. These were none other than Han Li and Lei Yunzi. Are you ready, fellow Taoist Han? Theoretically, I should have this dual lightning formation all figured out, but I've never actually tested it, so if something goes wrong, there's your disclaimer. Lei Yunzi chortled in an excited manner as arcs of lightning revolved around his body. If something really does go wrong, then so be it. I'll just have to accept my fate. However, seeing as this is theoretically sound, I have nothing to fear. On top of that, I've already briefly studied this dual lightning formation just now, and to me, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with it, Han Li replied with a smile. HMPH, you make it sound like you have a lot of trust in me, but you're just as meticulous and calculating as you were several hundred years ago. All right, those two are probably close to tracking us down again. Let's go. Lei Yunzi rolled his eyes before hurling his two formation plates through the air, and they disappeared in a flash into the two lightning formations. Immediately thereafter, he made a hand seal and began to chant something. The two lightning formations were activated amid a rumbling thunderclap, and countless arcs of lightning sprang up within the formations. Lei Yunzi let loose a loud cry, and several bolts of lightning that were as thick as water tanks erupted out of the center of the lightning formation, to inundate both himself and Han Li at once. The two of them then vanished from within the lightning formation, and around 15 minutes later, spatial fluctuations erupted nearby, following which the giant pink flower emerged out of thin air again. The petals of the flower slowly spread open to reveal Bao Hua and Hai, and the former's expression changed slightly as she cast her gaze toward the spot where the dual lightning formation had once been situated. Why are the fluctuations completely different from those of his past teleportations? Even I can't sense their potential teleportation destination anymore. Bao Hua murmured to herself in a surprised manner. That's impossible. Aren't you already close to figuring out that man's lightning formation? How did this happen? Hai exclaimed. Not only that, but I'm also no longer able to sense the tracking mark I planted in him, which means that he's either dead or really managed to teleport to millions of kilometers away, Bao Hua mused. Hai's eyes widened drastically upon hearing this, and he didn't know what to say in response. Judging from the remnant spatial fluctuations lingering here, it's most likely the latter. Looks like I underestimated them. They really did have a way to teleport such a vast distance at once. So be it, the celestial cloud flower is indeed quite useful to me, but it's not worth the energy required to conduct divination to track it down again. Let's go to the human territory. The spirit medicine that can completely heal me should be there. I'll only be able to obtain more detailed information once I get there and conduct divination again. Much to Hai's surprise, Bao Hua didn't seem to be bothered in the slightest by this and remained as calm as ever. Hai naturally didn't dare to offer any objections and immediately gave an affirmative response. Just as Bao Hu was about to depart, a peculiar feeling suddenly welled up in her heart, and her brows furrowed slightly as she cast her gaze toward a certain direction. However, after peering into the distance for a long while, she shook her head to forcibly rid herself of the uneasiness in her heart before departing from the scene atop her giant flower. Millions of kilometers away, countless silver arcs of lightning suddenly erupted out of thin air amid a loud thunderclap above a boundless lake. The arcs of lightning instantly formed a giant lightning formation, and following a flash of blinding silver light, Han Li and Lei Yunzi emerged. The two of them inspected their surroundings, and elated looks appeared on both of their faces. It worked. This dual lightning formation really was able to teleport us to millions of kilometers away. That feeling of constantly being watched has finally disappeared. Let's part ways here, fellow Taoist Han. The elation on Lei Yunzi's face faded, and he immediately took his leave without bothering to engage in any unnecessary pleasantries. Han Li nodded in response before a slightly forlorn look appeared on his face. It's a pity that this dual lightning formation requires two people with mastery in lightning formations to be used. Otherwise, it would be an exceptional life-saving ability. Nothing is perfect in this world. We're already very fortunate to have run into one another and managed to escape from our pursuers. As the saying goes, those who have survived the severest crisis can expect blessings in the days to come. Perhaps there's good fortune waiting for us right around the corner, Lei Yunzi chuckled. You've already been blessed with immense fortune to have obtained that celestial cloud flower, fellow Taoist. Han Li also chuckled in response. "Oh, are you interested in the celestial cloud flower as well, Brother Han?" Lei Yunzi asked with a hint of a smile on his face. Letter 1D41F, letter 1D563, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D556, letter 1D568, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D5F0, letter 1D698, letter 1D46. You've misunderstood me there, Brother Lei. The celestial cloud flower is indeed an extremely precious spirit item, but it contradicts with the cultivation arts that I'm using, so I have no interest in it. All right, I'll be taking my leave now. I hope to see you again someday, Han Li said as he cupped his fist in a parting salute. Lei Yunzi's expression eased slightly upon hearing this, and he also returned Han Li's salute. I wish you a safe and smooth journey, fellow Taoist. Han Li didn't say anything further, and gave Lei Yunzi one final nod before flying away as a streak of azure light. After Han Li had vanished into the distance, Lei Yunzi flew away in the opposite direction as a streak of silver light. Han Li flew in the opposite direction from human territory for 3 days and 3 nights, without stopping before finally arriving at a bleak and barren mountain. The chances of being discovered by devilish beings were very slim in such a secluded area, so he stopped and descended halfway up the mountain. He made a hand seal while chanting something, and a layer of yellow light enveloped his body before he vanished into the mountain in a flash. Moments later, Han Li reappeared within a certain cave inside the belly of the mountain, and he swept both sleeves through the air to release several tens of formation flags. The flags then all transformed into specks of spiritual light that disappeared into the surrounding space in a flash. In the next instant, a layer of faint white light appeared around the cave, and only then did Han Li heave a faint sigh of relief as he took a seat on a giant rock at the center of the cave. He flipped a hand over, and several jade vials of different sizes appeared one after another before being tossed up into the air. He tipped the jade around a dozen pills of different colors out of these vials before consuming them all at once, then closed his eyes and began to meditate. Not only did he have to recover his severely depleted magic power, he also had to refine the fierce medicinal effects of the spirit medicines he had directly consumed. It would be impossible to complete both of these objectives without spending at least 2 to 3 months. Han Li meditated for over 2 months, and when he reopened his eyes, not only had all of the potentially harmful medicinal effects been completely refined, his magic power and spiritual sense had both recovered to their peaks. Only now was Han Li truly feeling relaxed. In his current state, even if Yuan Cha were to track him down again, he would be confident in his own ability to face her in battle. After awakening from his meditation, Han Li paused momentarily before flipping a hand over to produce a white wooden box and a blue jade vial. Golden light flashed from his hand, and the white wooden box was immediately enveloped in a layer of golden light, then rose up into the air on its own. Han Li then cast his gaze toward the blue jade vial, and a hint of excitement appeared in his eyes. I've heard many extraordinary things about this chaotic yin-yang qi, but I didn't think I'd be able to obtain it someday. If I can refine it, my breakthrough to the late body integration stage will virtually be guaranteed, Han Li murmured to himself before flicking a finger toward the lid of the jade vial. The lid of the vial flew off on its own, and a ball of light emerged from within the vial before rising up into the air. Han Li's expression darkened slightly as his hand immediately shot forth before making a grabbing motion, releasing a burst of enormous invisible force that encompassed the entire cave. He pulled his hand back toward himself, and the ball of azure light tremored before being forcibly drawn into his grasp. Han Li cast his gaze down toward the ball of azure light and began to carefully appraise it through narrowed eyes. Within the azure light were 2 pea-sized specks of light, one black and one white. Blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes, and the 2 specks of light that were originally slightly blurry immediately became clearer to him. However, in the instant that he got a clear look at the 2 specks of light, he immediately shuddered as a blank look appeared on his face, and he was completely rooted to the spot. After a long while, a conflicted look suddenly appeared on Han Li's face, and he gritted his before throwing up a mouthful of blood while abruptly falling backward. What a powerful illusion of reincarnation. This chaotic yin-yang qi really is just as fearsome as the legends proclaim it to be. If it weren't for the fact that I managed to snap back to reality at the final moment, I would have completely lost myself for eternity within the worlds formed by the chaotic yin-yang qi, Han Li murmured to himself with a hint of lingering fear in his eyes. In the instant that he had used his bright-sight spirit eyes to appraise the chaotic yin-yang qi, He was drawn in by the essential power imbued within it and plunged into countless illusionary worlds, unable to return to reality. Thankfully, he had foreseen this in advance and planted a burst of energy within himself that would self-detonate at a set time to forcibly awaken him. Otherwise, he would have most likely sat here in a stupor until the day he died. The ordeal was naturally a very alarming one for Han Li, but at the same time, it confirmed to him that this was indeed chaotic yin-yang qi and couldn't be anything else. If he could refine this chaotic yin-yang qi, then a breakthrough to the late body integration stage would be all but guaranteed. However, prior to that, he had to pay another visit to the two old devils in the devil's ceiling lock. With that in mind, he suddenly pointed a finger at the azure ball of light, and a dull thunderclap rang out as a thin golden arc of lightning shot forth from his fingertip. The arc of lightning plunged into the azure ball of light in a flash, then immediately shot back. The black and white specks of light within the azure light remained completely unmoved, and it was as if nothing had ever happened. However, a content look appeared on Han Li's face, and he pointed a finger at the blue jade vial, upon which the vial expelled a burst of white light that swept up the ball of azure light before drawing it into the vial. Han Li swept a sleeve through the air to stow the jade vial away, then turned his attention to the wooden box that was hovering in midair. He opened his mouth to expel a string of beads, then laid a hand onto the top of his own head before slowly closing his eyes. A short while later, spatial fluctuations erupted within a certain mysterious space, and Han Li's spiritual sense clone appeared high up in the air. He inspected his surroundings, and his brows furrowed slightly upon discovering that he had found himself in a world of snow and ice. Before he had a chance to do anything, spatial fluctuations erupted nearby, and two humanoid figures emerged in unison. These were none other than Feng Zai and Qi Qigong. The two seemed to be very elated to see Han Li, and Feng Zai chortled as he asked, "What took you so long, fellow Taoist Han? Brother Qi and I were worried that you had landed yourself in some deep trouble. I was going to come and meet you much earlier than this, but during this past year I was constantly being hunted by some powerful enemies, and only just managed to escape from them," Han Li explained with a smile. "Seeing as you're here, I assume that you're safe now. I must congratulate you, fellow Taoist Han. Did you manage to obtain the chaotic yin-yang qi?" Qi Qigong asked with an expectant yet slightly nervous look in his eyes. "I'm sure the two of you are more aware than I am of whether any chaotic yin-yang qi has gone missing in the devil's ceiling lock," Han Li replied as he raised an eyebrow. Not only were Qi Qigong and Feng Zai not enraged by this response, both of them were ecstatic to hear Han Li's answer. We did indeed sense a disturbance in the devil's ceiling lock not long after we last parted ways, but we've been trapped in here and affected by the restrictions in this treasure, so we only had a vague sense of this disturbance. As such, we still require confirmation from you. Judging from what you said, is it safe to assume that you've already obtained the chaotic yin-yang qi?" Feng Zai was suddenly speaking to Han Li in a far more polite manner than in the past. "I encountered some mishaps during the process, but I have indeed already extracted the chaotic yin-yang qi. Isn't it about time you disclosed the refinement method to me now?" Han Li asked. "There's no hurry. The two of us have full trust in you, but shouldn't you show us some proof that you've managed to extract the chaotic yin-yang qi?" Qi Qigong asked in a cautious manner. Feng Zai also nodded in support of Qi Qigong's words. "I thought you'd ask that." Han Li had anticipated such a request, and he abruptly rubbed his hands together, then thrust them toward Feng Zai and Qi Qigong. An arc of golden lightning erupted out of the palm of each hand, and they hurtled directly toward the pair of old devils. The two devils' hearts stirred upon seeing this, and one of them made a grabbing motion, while the other opened his mouth wide. Thus, one of the golden arcs of lightning was caught by Feng Zai, while the other was devoured by Qi Qigong. Both of them closed their eyes and directed their spiritual sense toward their respective arc of lightning, and Han Li merely waited in silence with his arms crossed. After just the span of a few breaths, Feng Zai and Qi Qigong opened theirs almost in unison, and content looks appeared on both of their faces. There's no mistaking it. The aura is very feeble, but it definitely is the aura of chaotic yin-yang qi. Now that we've confirmed that, let's discuss the terms of our collaboration, Feng Zai said as an excited look reappeared on his face. In contrast, Han Li's expression darkened upon hearing this, and he asked in a cold voice, "Didn't you agree to give me the refinement method for half of the chaotic yin-yang qi? Have you changed your mind?" "Not at all, fellow Taoist Han. The original terms of our agreement naturally won't change, but further consideration must be taken when deciding how exactly we're going to facilitate the exchange. Otherwise, how will we decide whether we should hand over the refinement method first or if you should give us the chaotic yin-yang qi first? Qigong chuckled. I see. We're all bound by vows, but in the face of such an important treasure, vows of this nature are indeed rather lacking in gravity, Han Li said as his expression eased slightly. Indeed, and that's why fellow Taoist Feng and I have thought of a way to facilitate the exchange that should be satisfactory for both sides. Would you like to hear it, fellow Taoist Han? Qigong asked. Sure, go ahead, Han Li replied in an indifferent manner. It's actually very simple. We'll split the exchange process into several parts. We'll give a part of the refinement method first, and if you find it to be genuine, you can give us part of the chaotic yin-yang qi that you promised to us. After that, we'll continue to give you parts of the refinement method in exchange for portions of chaotic yin-yang qi. At the end of this process, there will only be a tiny amount of chaotic yin-yang qi you'd still owe us, and I'm sure you wouldn't be willing to incur the risk of backlash from inner demons over such a small amount of chaotic yin-yang qi. Similarly, we wouldn't be willing to relinquish that final portion of chaotic yin-yang qi just to withhold the final section of the refinement method, either, Feng Zai proposed. And Li remained silent upon hearing this, but the contemplative look in his eyes indicated that he was clearly carefully considering this proposal. The two devils were confident that Han Li would agree, but they still couldn't help but grow a little nervous. However, both of them were beings who had lived for countless years, and they were more than capable of maintaining poker faces as they awaited a decision from Han Li. That's a good idea. We'll do as you say, Han Li finally decided. Feng Zai was ecstatic, and he immediately replied, You've definitely made a wise decision, fellow Taoist Han. Let's begin our exchange right away. This is the first section of the refinement method. If you see no problems with it, then you must hand over the first portion of chaotic yin-yang qi to us within 3 days. If you're unable to do so in time, then we'll be giving up on this exchange. If that happens, not only will you have to suffer backlash from your inner demons, you'll also have no way of ever refining the chaotic yin-yang qi. Han Li merely nodded in response, and Qigong waved a sleeve upon seeing this, sending a ball of white light flying toward Han Li. Han Li raised a hand to catch the ball of white light, upon which it was revealed to be a pristine white jade slip. I'm going to study this section of the refinement method, and I'll return as quickly as I can once I arrive at a verdict. I'll be taking my leave now, Han Li said as he cupped his fist in a farewell salute, then disintegrated into specks of spiritual light. Do you think he'll uphold his end of the deal, Brother Qi? Feng Zai asked after Han Li had departed from this space. Aside from us and Zhu Guang, there's virtually no one else who's aware of the refinement method for chaotic yin-yang qi. If he wants to be able to refine it, then he has no choice but to fulfill his side of the exchange. After all, giving up half of his chaotic yin-yang qi is surely better than keeping all of it but being unable to use any of it. Besides, we're currently in the midst of the sacred sacrifice. With so many powerful enemies around, there's no way he'll give up on something that could give him a massive cultivation base boost, Qigong replied in a confident manner. I certainly hope so. With this chaotic yin-yang qi, it won't be long until we can get out of here. When that time comes, we can capture that brat together and forcibly extract the other half of that chaotic yin-yang qi from his body. There's no way he'll be able to truly refine it in such a short time, Feng Zai said with an excited look in his eyes. Of course, it's downright delusional for a mere human cultivator like him to think that he can take this chaotic yin-yang qi for himself. I can see he's quite a cautious little brat, but there's no way he could anticipate that we've already broken all of the restrictions in this devil's sealing lock. Now, all we're missing is his chaotic yin-yang qi. As long as we can have half a year to refine the chaotic yin-yang qi to an elementary level, that'll be enough for us to get out of this devil's sealing lock. When that time comes, Zhu Guang's days will be numbered. Qigong looked up at the snowflakes descending from the heavens as a hint of insanity appeared in his eyes. Haha, I'm really looking forward to that day. A sinister smile also appeared on Feng Zai's face. Meanwhile, outside the devil's sealing lock, Han Li had withdrawn his spiritual sense clone, and his nascent soul had also returned to his body. He slowly opened his eyes, then flipped a hand over to produce that white jade slip. He pressed the jade slip firmly against his own forehead, then injected his spiritual sense into it to inspect its contents. There was indeed a rather profound, incomplete refinement method in there, which was comprised of around 1,000 characters. As Hanley studied the contents of this incomplete refinement method, his expression began to undergo minute changes, and he went into meditation for 2 days and 2 nights with the jade slip pressed against his forehead. On the third morning, he finally withdrew his spiritual sense, and the jade slip on his forehead immediately crumbled away into dust. He had naturally already committed the contents of the jade slip completely to memory at this point. The refinement method looks to be real. Even if those 2 old devils want to try something, I'm sure they wouldn't risk ruining this exchange from the get-go, Hanley murmured to himself as a contemplative look appeared on his face. After pondering the issue for a while, Hanley arrived at a decision. I have to throw this devil sealing lock back into the Elder Devil realm after I obtain the refinement method. Looks like I won't be able to wait until I can venture into the Elder Devil realm with Patriarch Long and the others. I'll just have to toss it into a random node where our 2 realms have already overlapped. Having made that decision, he swept a sleeve through the air to release the blue jade vial containing the chaotic yin-yang qi, then laid a hand onto the top of his own head again. While Han Li was hiding in the primordial world near human territory, exchanging for the refinement method bit by bit from Qi Qigong and Feng Zai, Deep Heaven City had already been completely surrounded. A series of devilish strongholds that were each several thousand feet tall had been set up in front of each city wall, and within those strongholds were countless elite devilish armored warriors. Massive flying pagodas had also appeared in the air above the devilish army, and they were being surrounded by countless flying carriages and battle arcs. Between the stronghold were a series of stone mountains and craters of different sizes, within which were countless devilish beasts of varying power levels. On a giant platform at the top of one of the devilish strongholds, there were over 100 high-grade devilish beings appraising Deep Heaven City from afar. They were led by a crimson-robed young man who wore a frosty expression, but if one were to look closely at him, they'd discover that he seemed to be rather distracted, as if his mind were elsewhere. Meanwhile, the other high-grade devilish beings were discussing something among themselves in hushed tones. A short while later, the crimson-robed young man withdrew his gaze and said, "It's time. Begin attacking the city. I want to have this Deep Heaven City fully conquered within a few years." The surrounding devilish beings all adopted serious expressions upon hearing this, and they answered in unison, "We'll do everything in our power to make sure that happens, Master Zhu Guang." There was a red-armored guard standing beside the crimson-robed young man, and he immediately tossed the item that he was holding up into the air. A ball of silver light instantly rose up into the heavens, climbing to an altitude of over 100,000 feet before exploding with a resounding boom. A silver rune with a diameter of around 1,000 feet then emerged in midair before radiating dazzling silver light. A series of other slightly smaller silver runes also rose up into the air in quick succession all around Deep Heaven City, as if to resonate with this initial giant silver rune. All of the devilish beings in the air and on the ground below immediately began to prepare for battle upon seeing this. A series of giant light formations lit up within the strongholds, following which countless black balls of light the size of small mountains emerged in the air above the strongholds, then hurtled directly toward Deep Heaven City. The space in the wake of the giant balls of light twisted and warped drastically, indicating that each ball of light was imbued with enormous power. The devilish pagodas and flying carriages within the dense devilish chi also began to unleash attacks, sending countless pillars of light raining down from above. Even before these attacks had struck the protective restrictions set up over Deep Heaven City, rows of formations appeared in the air above the city walls. 5-colored light flashed, and countless fireballs, wind blades, ice spikes, and other magic attacks surged forth in a frenzy to clash with the attacks unleashed by the devilish army. Earth-shattering booms erupted one after another, as the scintillating explosions of light illuminated the dark sky. Under the illumination of this light, one could make out groups of devilish beasts charging toward Deep Heaven City like hundreds of giant pythons. Some of these devilish beasts were galloping along the ground, some were gliding along at low altitudes, and some were flapping their wings vigorously as they soared higher up in the air. At the same time, a group of flying carriages and giant arcs were also slowly advancing toward the city. All of a sudden, groups of armored devilish warriors emerged near the giant flying devilish beasts. These warriors were either standing atop devilish clouds or seated on devilish steeds. Thus, the devilish assault against Deep Heaven City officially commenced. Deep within a lush forest, a fair-skinned beauty in a suit of black armor was seated beneath a massive tree with her eyes closed in meditation. Standing beside her was another woman in a blue palatial dress, who was appraising her with a concerned expression. After a long while, the black-armored woman exhaled and slowly opened her eyes. "Have you fully recovered, Sister Liu Jai?" Xianxia hurriedly asked as an elated look appeared on her face. If Bao Hua's sunset true flames were that easy to recover from, then she wouldn't have been so renowned in our holy realm. I've taken some spirit pills, but I've only just barely managed to repress my injuries. Unless I go into seclusion for at least a century, there's no way I could fully recover. However, it's pretty clear that Bao Hua is also yet to recover from her injuries. Otherwise, this clone of mine definitely wouldn't have been able to survive her sunset arrow, Liu Jai replied. Letter 1D487, letter 1D493, letter 1D486, letter 1D486, letter 1D66C, letter 1D486, letter 1D484, letter 1D4F8, letter 1D4AT. Indeed, however, the fact that our true bodies are unable to descend into this realm places us at a severe disadvantage against her, Xianxia sighed with a complex look on her face. We would indeed be no match for her on our own, but the current Bao Hua is no longer the same renowned sacred ancestor she once was. We have a devilish army at our disposal. There's no need for us to face her alone. However, after we get back, make sure that you don't go anywhere by yourself unless it's absolutely necessary. Only by staying in the devilish army will we be able to ensure our own safety, Liu Jai said in a cold voice. Thank you for your words of caution, sister, but judging from Bao Hua's personality, I don't think she'd be all that keen on hunting down a few clones of ours, and it wouldn't help her current situation anyway. She must be aware that the sacred sacrifice has already commenced, yet she still dares to appear here. She must have some type of ulterior motive, Xianxia said in a cautious manner. Ulterior motive? What motive can she have other than to recover from her injuries and regain her magic power? Liu Jai chuckled coldly in response. That's true. Bao Hua is quite a renowned divination master in our holy realm. Could it be that she's here because she's tracked something down that can help her make a recovery? I don't think she'd be willing to take such a risk otherwise. Liu Jai faltered slightly upon hearing this before a contemplative look appeared in her eyes. Perhaps so. Let's set this matter aside for another time. For now, I'll take you back to human territory. As long as we can reunite with your other clone, we'll have nothing to worry about, Xianxia suggested. I didn't go through all this trouble to sneak into the realm behind the backs of those old geezers just to hide somewhere like a coward. I came here to secure more benefits for the two of us. According to the agreement forged between the sacred ancestors, all of us sacred ancestors will receive ownership rights over half of the human territory we managed to conquer in this spirit realm. I can't just go into hiding and pass up such a fantastic opportunity, Liu Jai said. Then what do you suggest we do, sister? Xianxia asked with furrowed brows. Once we get back, I'm going to take a dragonlock pill to stimulate the latent potential of this clone, so it can temporarily recover 80% to 90% of its magic power. After that, we should still be able to assist you from the shadows as long as we don't encounter overly powerful opponents, Liu Jai said in a solemn manner. Xianxia was very surprised to hear this. Dragonlock pill, but if you take that pill, you'll need to go into seclusion for at least 1,000 years to recover from your injuries and the pill's side effects. So be it. If we can reap enough benefits, it's hardly of any consequence if this mere clone of mine has to go into seclusion for 1,000 years. During this time, I'll have to trouble you to protect me so this clone doesn't perish, Liu Jai said. Rest assured, I descended into this spirit realm for the sole purpose of assisting you, sister. Who would have thought that we'd encounter Bao Hua here? Thinking back to the bond we once shared, it really is quite sad that things have turned out like this, Xianxia said with a wry smile. HMPH, Bao Hu chose a path that diverged from ours, so we were always destined to be enemies. The winner takes all while the loser gets nothing. That's always been the case in our holy realm. If I had been defeated on that day instead, the fate I would have suffered definitely would have been a lot more tragic than Bao Hua's current situation, Liu Jai harumphed coldly in response. Perhaps, however, Bao Hua is one of the three great patriarchs of our holy race. It'll be very difficult to completely erase her influence. It's not very apparent on the surface, but deep down, I can tell that there are still many people who are loyal to her, Xianxia sighed. As a matriarch, her influence naturally far exceeds that of a sacred ancestors. However, no matter how much influence one possesses, their influence still won't be able to stand the test of time. In 30,000 or 40,000 years, There may still be people who remember her and are loyal to her, but after 100,000 years or even 1 million years, her influence will definitely cease to exist. Even so, we can't just allow her to roam this area. Once my true body is able to descend into this realm, I'll organize a group of people to specifically target her. We naturally can't put an end to her life, but at the same time, we definitely can't allow her to foil our plans, Liu Jai said in a cold voice. Seeing as you've already made a decision, I naturally have no objections. Now that you've managed to repress your injuries, let's return to human territory right away. Back when we had first set off, the restrictions of the Spirit Sovereign City had already been almost completely whittled down. Perhaps we'll be able to conquer the city as soon as we get back, Yuan Cha said, as a hint of excitement suddenly appeared on her face. In contrast, Liu Jai was a lot calmer. The army being led by my other clone consists of elite forces that were hand-picked by me. It can rank among the top 3 of all of the armies that have descended into the spirit realm, so it would be surprising to me if it couldn't conquer a single human city. That's true. Otherwise, that clone of yours wouldn't have had the spare capacity to send me out to foil the humans' plans, Yuan Cha chuckled. Let's go. Hopefully, everything progresses as smoothly as we imagine, Liu Jai said as she looked up into the sky. It's a pity that we let that hand brat get away, Yuan Cha grumbled as a frustrated look appeared on her face. Liu Jai merely smiled and remained silent before opening her mouth to expel a ball of red light. The red light contained a translucent red flying carriage that was only several inches in size. The carriage was extremely intricate, and it instantly swelled to several tens of feet in size at her behest. Yuan Cha flew onto the carriage without any hesitation, and Liu Jai also rose to her feet before slowly drifting onto the carriage. In the next instant, the flying carriage sped away into the distance as a streak of red light. 5 months later, the Spirit Sovereign City, one of the 3 sovereign cities of the human race, was finally conquered by the devilish army. Not only were all of the human cultivators in the city killed, even the body integration stage elders hadn't managed to escape. However, those elders had left the devilish army a huge memento to remember them by, self-detonating together to kill the same number of devilish lords, as well as thousands of high-grade devilish beings. The only one who managed to escape was the newly appointed Spirit Sovereign, who unleashed an incredible ability to enhance her powers to an unfathomable degree. In the end, she was able to carve out a path of escape for herself, and even though she had sustained severe injuries, she managed to flee in the end. Following that battle, no further news of the Spirit Sovereign arose. In a fit of fury, the high-grade devilish beings of the devilish army slew all of the human cultivators they had captured, and felled the gargantuan tree that was the symbol of the Spirit Sovereign City. The entire city was destroyed, and very few buildings were left standing. However, the devilish army had also suffered heavy losses during this battle. As such, instead of immediately continuing onward to sweep through the nearby area, they rested and recuperated in the remains of Spirit Sovereign City and began to replenish their lost devilish beasts through the passageways leading to the Elder Devil realm. What was quite astonishing to the remaining human forces in the Tianling region was that the devilish army was beginning to build devilish fortresses and strongholds on the territory they had conquered. They were also beginning to plant some inky black devilish trees that released devilish chi in the nearby area, and it seemed that they were planning to settle permanently in the spirit realm. This was naturally quite an alarming discovery, and these human forces did everything in their power to inform the human settlements in other areas of this information. Not long after that, all of the most prominent human settlements had been made aware of this, including Deep Heaven City. On the surface, they didn't display much of a reaction to this, but things were not so calm behind the scenes. In the primordial world, around a dozen pagodas that were around 1,000 feet tall had appeared at the center of a dense primitive forest on the edge of the Wood Tribe's territory. These pagodas were linked by sections of gray city walls to form a small stronghold with a diameter of around 500 meters. Within this stronghold, dense devilish chi churned, and groups of armor-clad devilish beings could be seen patrolling the city walls. In the air above the stronghold was a black hole with an area of around an acre. This, one of the nodes where the Elder Devil realm had overlapped with the spirit realm. However, compared to the super nodes that had appeared on human territory, this one was completely insignificant and diminutive. The red-skinned devilish beings that were patrolling the stronghold all possessed rather lackluster cultivation bases, and they didn't seem to be true devilish elites. This was quite a normal occurrence. After all, the Elder Devil race certainly wasn't going to send its elite forces to such a tiny spatial node. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that the number of nodes on the Wood Tribe's territory was far lesser than those of the human and demon territories, there wouldn't even be any devilish strongholds set up here. Judging from the large clusters of charred trees and the countless craters that riddled the surface of the ground, one could see that many battles had taken place here, but the losers of those battles clearly weren't these devilish beings. Of course, this was also because the Wood Tribe wasn't paying much heed to such a small devilish node. Instead, they were directing the vast majority of their forces toward the giant nodes that actually posed a threat to the Wood Tribe. However, to the local Wood Tribe settlements, these smaller nodes posed a serious threat. As such, every once in a while, they would organize a group of warriors to attack the stronghold, but unfortunately, their efforts had all been in vain thus far. Furthermore, this devilish stronghold was able to constantly draw power from the devilish node up above, so it was steadily becoming more powerful. This naturally sowed even more panic among the nearby Wood Tribe settlements, and the frequency of the attacks they unleashed increased even further. On this day, a group of Wood Tribe beings appeared several tens of kilometers away from the devilish fortress. They were clad in yellow and green wooden armor, and they were slowly advancing toward the fortress using movement techniques. There was a high level of variance in the cultivation bases of these Wood Tribe beings, but they were all moving in a very stealthy manner and seemed to be quite well trained. They were led by a spatial tempering stage elderly man and a late deity transformation stage middle-aged couple, and these three were also the ones with the highest cultivation bases in the group. The three of them were traveling at the forefront of the group, while carefully conversing with one another through voice transmissions. "Thank you for lending us your assistance, Elder Zhu. If you can help us take down this devilish fortress, we'll be sure to thank you with a handsome reward for your efforts," the middle-aged man said in a grateful manner. "There's no need to thank me. I'm also a member of a Wood Tribe, so it's only right that I contribute to the resistance against these devilish beings. However, I've taken quite a risk by coming here and leaving my family exposed, so we'll have to take care of matters here as quickly as possible," the elderly man said in a slightly concerned manner. "Rest assured, Elder Zhu, we've brought along all of the most powerful forces we have, and we also intend to end things in one final battle. Otherwise, the longer things drag on for, the more detrimental it'll be to us. Through our last battle, we were able to determine that the most powerful cultivators in the fortress are only 4 deity transformation stage devilish beings. With your help, I'm sure we'll be able to take them down," the middle-aged Wood Tribe woman chimed in as well. "If that's all they have, then you can leave them all to me while all of you focus on destroying that devilish node. Without that thing hanging over our heads, those devilish beings won't pose a threat to us any longer," the elderly man said. The middle-aged couple exchanged a glance upon hearing this before nodding in agreement. "All right, we'll do as you say, Elder Zhu. After we destroy that node, we'll help you kill those high-grade devilish beings." The elderly man's expression eased after receiving this affirmative response, and the three of them discussed strategy for a while longer before focusing on forging ahead. However, regardless of whether it was the 3 high-grade Wood Tribe beings or the thousands of other Wood Tribe beings with them, none of them noticed a pair of spirit eyes that were flashing with blue light, appraising them from within a dark cloud in the sky above the forest. The owner of the pair of spirit eyes was none other than Han Li, and he glanced at the group, then cast his gaze toward the devilish fortress with a contemplative look in his eyes. All of a sudden, a smile appeared on his face, and he flew out of the cloud as an indistinct azure shadow, flying toward the devilish fortress along with the group of Wood Tribe beings. Around 10 minutes later, a loud explosion suddenly erupted near the devilish stronghold, following which over 100 wooden giants that were several hundred feet tall rushed out of the dense forest amid a flash of green light. They rushed toward the stronghold like devastating wrecking balls, followed close by the group of Wood Tribe beings. A series of green wooden spears, bows, and arrows appeared in their hands, and launched the projectiles toward the stronghold in a torrential barrage. All of the spears and arrows that were launched instantly swelled to several times their original size before crashing into the protective light barrier around the stronghold, sending ripples running along its surface amid an incessant string of resounding booms. At this point, the wooden giants had reached the fortress, and their hands transformed into giant white metal hammers that were brought down upon the light barrier with ferocious might. The light barrier began to tremor violently, and it seemed to be on the brink of crumbling away. Everything had happened within the span of a few breaths, and only now did the devilish beings in the stronghold react to the situation. Loud sirens immediately rang out all over the stronghold, while bursts of black light descended from the city walls before falling upon the wood tribe beings down below like rain. An extremely fierce battle was about to unfold. Black and green light flashed and intertwined, forming a giant net above the fortress that rumbled and flashed incessantly. The wooden giants seemed to be a little clumsy and maladroit, but their bodies were as hard as iron and steel, and attacks from ordinary devilish beings were only able to inflict some insignificant pit and bumps into their bodies. A short while later, a giant opening was created by them in the city wall, and they charged onward in a completely fearless manner. These wooden giants seemed to possess tremendous strength, smashing all of the devilish beings before them into mincemeat with their giant hammer hands. They led the other wood tribe beings straight into the devilish fortress, but their actions had also enraged the high-grade devilish beings in the fortress. One of them let loose a loud cry, and several menacing roars immediately rang out from within a few giant buildings in the fortress. Immediately thereafter, a dozen or so 100 feet long rhinoceros-like devilish beasts rushed out of those buildings. These super devilish beasts all had bright red eyes, and they opened their mouths to expel pillars of white light that struck the wooden giants in a flash. Around a dozen wooden giants immediately stumbled and almost crashed to the ground. Furthermore, charred holes had appeared on the parts of their bodies that had been struck by the pillars of light. The rest of the wooden giants continued to charge toward the giant beasts, but the super devilish beasts weren't backing down either. They lowered their heads and pounced toward the oncoming wooden giants to engage them in a fierce battle. Deafening roars and resounding booms rang out, and the two sides seemed to be evenly matched. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of feet above the ground, the elderly man and the middle-aged couple were facing off against 4 armor-clad devilish beings. A high-grade being that resembled a giant bear glanced at the elderly man, and as opposed to being panicked or alarmed, a sinister look appeared on his face as he said, "HMPH, I was wondering what gave you the courage to attack us like this, so you've brought along reinforcements. You've made our job a lot easier. After killing this old fart, there shouldn't be any wood tribe beings of a higher cultivation base in this area." The middle-aged couple's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, but the elderly man remained calm and collected as he replied in a cold voice, "You think a group of deity transformation stage devilish trash like you can bring me down? Let me see if your powers can back up your words. If they're incapable of bringing you down, then how about me?" A rumbling boom rang out as spatial fluctuations erupted in midair, and a black figure appeared at the center of the 4 high-grade devilish beings before appraising the wood tribe trio with a cold expression. This was a man in a brocade robe with a pair of horns on his head, and there was a ruthless look in his small, triangular eyes. The elderly man's heart immediately sank upon seeing this. This was a late spatial tempering stage devilish being while he was only at the early spatial tempering stage. He was most likely no match for this new enemy. The middle-aged couple were unable to ascertain this devilish man's exact cultivation base, but they could also sense that his aura was more powerful than that of the elderly man, and their expressions darkened significantly. "We're very fortunate that you paid us a visit, esteemed envoy. Otherwise, we would be in huge trouble here. These are the leaders of the wood tribe resistance forces in the nearby area. We'll have to trouble you to help us take care of them," the bear-like devilish being said as he extended a respectful bow toward the brocade-robed man. "Hee, these 3 are all that we're dealing with. I can kill them all with one hand tied behind my back. Rest assured, there's no way I'll be letting them get away," the brocade-robed man guffawed with a disdainful look in his eyes. The elderly man took a deep breath to repress the alarm in his heart, then quickly transmitted his voice to the middle-aged couple. "We're in trouble here, fellow Taoists. I'll do my best to hold off this devil, lead everyone else on a retreat right away." The middle-aged couple's hearts jolted upon hearing this, and the middle-aged man hurriedly transmitted his voice in response. "Don't engage in a direct battle with this devil, Elder Zhu. If the opportunity arises, you have to retreat as well." The elderly man nodded in a grim manner and didn't say anything further. Instead, he swept both sleeves through the air to release a dozen or so azure wooden balls, all of which transformed into azure balls of light that encompassed all 5 devils before him. The cold look in the eyes of the brocade-robed devil became even more pronounced as he harumphed coldly, and bright red light suddenly began to glow from his horns. Countless crimson threads shot forth, all of which struck the surrounding balls of azure light with unerring accuracy before piercing through them in a flash. However, before the brocade-robed devil had a chance to do anything else, a crisp crack akin to the sound of shattering porcelain suddenly rang out. All of the azure balls of light exploded in unison and radiated blinding spiritual light. All 5 devils immediately closed their eyes as an instinctive reaction to this piercing light. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the middle-aged couple shot forth toward 2 different directions as 2 streaks of azure light, and at the same time, both of them let loose long cries of different octaves. The 5 devils were only disoriented for a split second before immediately returning to normal, and they were naturally all infuriated to see this. "I'm going to rip you to shreds and torment your soul for all of eternity. Go and chase down those 2. Leave this old fart to me," the brocade-robed man roared as he rubbed his hands together. Bursts of inky black devilish chi erupted from his body, then converged to form a 2-headed devilish projection. The devilish projection was rather blurry and indistinct, and one could only just barely make out its rough form, but it was extremely fast and pounced toward the elderly man in a vicious manner. The elderly man remained calm as he opened his mouth to release several streaks of yellow sword chi. The sword chi formed a sword barrier that shielded him from the oncoming devilish projection, and he seemed to be content to merely defend himself against his opponent's attacks. The devilish projection immediately gained a significant upper hand as soon as it clashed with the sword chi, but it was unable to immediately break through the barrier to kill the elderly man. The 4 deity transformation stage devilish beings shared a few hesitant glances upon seeing this, then split up into 2 groups to pursue the 2 streaks of azure light. Meanwhile, the wood tribe beings who had just stormed into the fortress down below all displayed expressions of surprise upon hearing the long cries from the middle-aged couple, but they immediately turned around and flew back the way they had come without any hesitation. However, on this occasion, the devilish beings weren't willing to let them leave so easily. They let loose fierce war cries as they rushed out of the stronghold to pursue the retreating wood tribe beings, and none of the wooden giants were able to assist them as they were still locked in battle with the giant rhinoceros beasts. Thus, the entire stronghold was instantly plunged into a state of chaos. Meanwhile, no one noticed a faint azure shadow appear high up in the air right below the devilish node, then reverted back to its original form, revealing itself to be Han Li. The node was covered by a layer of inky black devilish chi, and there were over 100 devilish beings on a dozen or so battle canoes guarding the node. They were clearly far more powerful than the average devilish being in the stronghold, and they remained completely unmoved by the battle taking place below them. These devilish beings were naturally greatly alarmed to see someone suddenly appear before them, but before they had a chance to do anything, Han Li swept a sleeve through the air to release his azure bamboo cloudswarm swords, which transformed into hundreds of azure threads that instantly vanished into thin air. In the next instant, all of the devilish beings and their flying treasures were shredded by streaks of azure sword chi, following which Han Li opened his mouth to expel a ball of silver flames. The silver fireball exploded as soon as it emerged, scattering through the air as countless silver sparks. The remains of these devilish beings and their battle canoes were set alight as soon as they came into contact with these silver flames, and they were incinerated into nothingness. Immediately thereafter, layers of 5-colored light appeared over Han Li's body as he quickly made a hand seal, and he flew directly into the dense devilish chi. This devilish chi was clearly supposed to be some type of restriction, but it merely gave way to the 5-colored light around Han Li's body. In the blink of an eye, Han Li had passed through the devilish chi and arrived before the devilish node up above. Letter 1D627, letter 1D4C7, letter 1D452, letter 1D452, letter 1D464, letter 212F, letter 1D624, letter 2134, letter 1D62E. The node was a vast expanse of darkness, and there were bursts of devilish chi occasionally pouring out of it. A solemn look appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, and after a brief pause for contemplation, he made a hand seal to summon a suit of antiquated black devilish armor over his own body. Countless black runes then surged out of the suit of armor in a frenzy at his behest before enveloping his entire body. Immediately thereafter, extremely dazzling and vibrant light erupted from his body, and he transformed into a giant 5-colored heavenly phoenix. The heavenly phoenix gave off an extremely authoritative aura, and it flapped its wings to send faint fluctuations rippling through the nearby space, instantly eradicating all of the oncoming gusts of black wind. The giant heavenly phoenix then flew directly into the massive black hole. Five-colored light flashed within the black hole, and the heavenly phoenix abruptly vanished. With the heavenly phoenix's innate spatial abilities and Han Li's past experience with spatial rifts, he naturally wasn't going to see this mere devilish node as much of an obstacle. After all, even normal devilish lords could pass through this node. There should definitely be no issues for him. The only thing that he was wary of was that there could be some extremely powerful devilish beings situated on the other side of the node, in which case he would be landing himself in a lot of hot water. However, the chances of this happening in such a small node was virtually negligible. After flying through the devilish winds for a while and breaking through a dozen or so barriers formed by spatial power, specks of light began to appear up ahead. Han Li was ecstatic to see this, and he flapped his wings vigorously. Five-colored light flashed over his body, and he became a barely visible shadow. The exit on the other side of the node led to a boundless gray desert. On the ground down below, there were two black buildings that seemed to be a pair of watchtowers, within which were several tens of devilish guards who looked up at the node from time to time. After the span of just a few breaths, the spatial power faded, and the heavenly phoenix emerged from the node, then immediately vanished into thin air. Even the most powerful devilish guards situated in the two watchtowers were only at the nascent soul stage, and nothing of note had happened here for many years, so they had become complacent and completely failed to notice Han Li's stealthy entrance. The heavenly phoenix emerged in the distant sky before reverting back to its human form, and Han Li heaved a faint sigh of relief as he cast his gaze back toward the node with a slightly peculiar look in his eyes. His infiltration into the Elder Devil realm had been far smoother than he had anticipated, and he hadn't been made to use any of the measures he had painstakingly prepared. This naturally made him quite elated. Han Li began to inspect his surroundings in this realm, that the human race proclaimed to be a hellish cesspool of a world. The sky was of a faint yellow color, and there was no cloud or mist to be seen. There were 3 crimson suns overhead, and aside from that, everything else seemed to be quite similar to what things were like in the spirit realm. The only other striking difference that could be sensed was that the spiritual chi here was clearly a lot less abundant than it was in the spirit realm, and there was faint devilish chi drifting all throughout the surrounding air. However, this devilish chi was not very pronounced, and it could easily be missed if someone weren't paying attention to it. This was a rather surprising sight for Han Li. However, he hadn't ventured into the Elder Devil realm to conduct geographic research. He had something important that he had to do. As such, he only inspected his surroundings for a short while before chanting something, and his suit of devilish armor reappeared before expelling a large amount of inky black devilish chi that completely inundated his body. Immediately thereafter, he made a hand seal, and his human aura was completely concealed. He then let loose a low cry, and faint golden scales appeared over his body. However, after coming into contact with the devilish chi, the scales immediately turned black. At the same time, a third black demonic eye also appeared on his glabella. Han Li made a brief inspection of his own body with a faint smile on his face. With his current aura and appearance, he was identical to a high-grade devilish being. If he didn't encounter any devilish beings that were more powerful than himself, no one would be able to see through his disguise. Following his transformation, Han Li didn't dare to linger in the area any longer and immediately flew away as a gust of black wind. Around an hour later, he emerged from the desert and appeared above a hill that was riddled with gray shrubs. As soon as he reached this place, he immediately noticed that the devilish chi had become denser. The difference was only an extremely minute one, but it confirmed Han Li's suspicions, which was that just like spiritual chi, the abundance of devilish chi differed from area to area in the Elder Devil realm. Han Li continued onward and flew for a day and a night. He passed through the hilly region, over a giant lake, and through several black mountain ranges. Perhaps it was because the Elder Devil realm was very bleak and barren to begin with, or he was traveling in the wrong direction, but aside from a few low-grade devilish beasts, he didn't encounter any other devilish beings. This made Han Li feel slightly more relaxed, but also a bit more wary. On the 4th day, Han Li finally encountered several mid-grade devilish beings, with human bodies and horse heads battling at the foot of a small mountain. These devilish beings wielded wooden clubs with beast-like garments draped over their bodies. They were extremely ferocious and seemed to possess a certain level of intelligence. There was a black devilish beast that resembled a saber-toothed tiger lying completely still nearby, and it was quite clear that these devilish beings were fighting over this prized prey. Letter 1D6 letter 1D5 letter 1D5 letter 1D4 1 letter 1D6 letter 1D5 letter 1D6 letter 1D5 letter 1D5 Han Li was ecstatic to see this, and he descended from above before releasing a few arcs of golden lightning to knock out these devilish beings. He then made a grabbing motion to draw one of them into his grasp before pressing a hand firmly onto the top of the devilish being's head. His eyes narrowed slightly, and black light flashed from his fingertips as he unleashed a soul search technique. Just as he had expected, the devilish being possessed only a very elementary level of intelligence, and there really wasn't much for him to sift through in its spiritual sense. Thankfully, he wasn't searching for any complex information, and through his soul search technique, he discovered a suitable place that wasn't far away. Golden lightning sprang forth from his hand again to instantly incinerate this devilish being into dust, and he did the same for the other devilish beings, as well as that devilish beast carcass. After that, he flew toward a different direction compared to his original one. Several hours later, a boundless canyon appeared up ahead. The black winds faded, and Han Li appeared in the air above the canyon before casting his gaze downward. The canyon down below was several thousand feet wide and unfathomably deep. Howling winds were blowing incessantly through it, and there was a vast expanse of murky yellow mist within it. Han Li descended into the canyon without any hesitation as gray light flashed over his body, and the fierce winds faded as soon as it came into contact with this gray light. As he descended further and further, the air temperature plummeted drastically, and a layer of frost could be seen on the faces of the canyon. These temperatures naturally weren't low enough to be of concern to Han Li, and after descending for over 10,000 feet, he finally reached the bottom of the canyon, where a blue glacier was situated. Theoretically speaking, the temperatures here should have frozen this river completely solid, but it showed no signs of freezing over at all. However, there were thick layers of blue ice on either side of the river, and fierce winds were howling in the air over 100 feet above the glacier. Han Li hovered in the air several tens of feet above the glacier, and he swept his gaze downward, upon which a hint of surprise appeared on his face. This river is indeed rather peculiar. It's so calm and still on the surface, but it's as violent as a waterfall deeper down. It most likely leads straight to an underground river. On top of that, the glacial power here is also rather peculiar, Han Li murmured to himself. Right at this moment, a burst of hissing rang out from the fierce winds up above, and two extraordinarily fast streaks of blue light shot forth, reaching Han Li in a flash. This was a pair of translucent blue flying snakes with triangular heads and black crowns that resembled those of roosters. Just from their appearance alone, it was quite clear that they possessed lethal poison. Han Li's expression darkened upon seeing this, and his hands shot forth in a blur to catch the two flying snakes before crushing them without any hesitation. The two snakes didn't even have a chance to utter one final sound before they were instantly killed. Han Li tossed the bodies of the flying snakes into the water down below. They were instantly frozen solid before slowly sinking into the river, vanishing into its depths in the blink of an eye. Han Li closed his eyes before releasing his spiritual sense to track the progress of the two snake carcasses, following which a content look soon appeared on his face. As expected, they were swept away. I don't know where this glacier will lead to, but I'm sure something that's tossed into it will have a very low likelihood of being discovered, Han Li murmured to himself as he flipped his hand over to produce a pristine white wooden box. He took a rather forlorn glance at the wooden box, but gritted his teeth and tossed it downward in the end. A layer of blue ice instantly appeared over the surface of the wooden box, and it also sank into the glacier. Han Li stared down into the depths of the glacier in silence, and after close to an hour had passed, he heaved a faint sigh as the expression on his face eased slightly. At this point, the wooden box had already disappeared into the underground river. He was quite reluctant to part with the treasure, but it contained two sacred ancestors, so it was naturally best to get rid of it as early as possible. He didn't know whether those two devils would be able to escape from the confinement of the devil's sealing lock someday, but from this day forth, they no longer had anything to do with him. The Elder Devil realm naturally wasn't a place to linger in for an extended period of time, so Han Li didn't hesitate any longer as he flew out of the canyon before embarking on a journey back to the spirit realm. Meanwhile, within the space inside the wooden box that was drifting along the underground river, Qigong was meditating in a cave-like secret chamber with black and white light flashing over his body, seemingly cultivating something. Within a mysterious stone hall elsewhere in the same space, Feng Zai was doing the same thing while seated atop a futon. Both of them were completely oblivious to what was going on outside the wooden box, and if they were aware, they would most likely be cursing Han Li with all of the derogatory terms in their vocabulary. After all, Han Li had just unintentionally foiled their plan to secure the other half of the chaotic yin-yang qi through his cautious actions. The return journey proved to be a very smooth one for Han Li. Flying at full speed, he returned to the Yellow Desert in just a day, and the devilish node soon appeared up ahead. Everything was the same as when he had left the node, and Han Li wasn't all that surprised to see this. The black qi around his body faded, and he transformed into a heavenly phoenix again before flying toward the node as a faint streak of light. After just a few flashes, he flew into the node, escaping the detection of the devilish guards down below once again, and this journey through the node was also a smooth and uneventful one. A short while later, the heavenly phoenix emerged in the spirit realm as a ball of five-colored light, but in the instant before he exited the node, he swept his spiritual sense through the surrounding area. As he had expected, devilish beings had surrounded the node, and a cold smile appeared on his face after detecting this. Bright light erupted from the heavenly phoenix's body, and it disappeared from the spatial passageway in a flash. In the next instant, spatial fluctuations appeared outside the node, and an azure figure emerged out of thin air. As soon as Han Li appeared, a loud cry of attack rang out nearby. Immediately thereafter, countless streaks of black light hurtled toward him from all sides, and fierce winds were swept up overhead as a dozen or so two-headed devilish birds swooped down from above. Down below, two azure battle arcs that were each several hundred feet in length emerged, and they blasted forth two pillars of black light that reached Han Li in a flash. Several hundred devilish guards had gathered near the exit of the node, and as soon as Han Li had returned, they immediately unleashed a torrential barrage of attacks. Han Li had anticipated this situation well in advance, and despite the fierce attacks being aimed at him, a faint smile appeared on his face. He abruptly swept a sleeve forward, and a burst of gray light swept forth before forming a translucent light barrier that completely shielded his body within. He then flicked his fingers casually up toward the giant devilish birds, paying no heed to the oncoming streaks of black light around him. Around a dozen streaks of azure sword qi shot forth in a flash from his fingertips, and before they even knew what had happened, each of the devilish birds had been sliced into two. Their carcasses crashed down from above amid a rain of blood, and the high-grade devilish beings appraising the proceedings from afar were extremely alarmed to see this. Those two-headed devilish birds possessed bodies that were more resolute than iron and steel. Even the average treasure wouldn't be able to harm them in the slightest, yet they had just been sliced apart by Han Li with ease. However, whatever was even more astonishing to them was that all of the streaks of black light and that pillar of light had vanished as soon as they had struck the gray light barrier around Han Li's body. It was as if they had all been devoured by the light barrier. "That's a body integration stage human cultivator. Retreat at once," one of the high-grade devilish beings hurriedly commanded. Those high-grade devilish beings were none other than the four deity transformation stage devilish beings, and that brocade-robed late-spatial tempering stage devil. After they had dealt the Wood Tribe resistance force a heavy defeat, they discovered that the devilish beings guarding the node had disappeared, and this had naturally been quite an alarming discovery for them. They had no idea what had happened, but if some kind of mishap were to befall the devilish node, then they would all be held accountable. Thus, following some discussion, they contacted the other devilish strongholds nearest to them and gathered a group of elite devilish warriors to surround the node. In reality, they were doing this just for show, and they didn't actually think that they would catch anyone, but much to their surprise, Han Li had returned after staying for only a few days in the Elder Devil realm. As soon as he returned, he immediately fell into their trap, and initially they had been ecstatic to see this, but their elation soon gave way to horror when the brocade-robed devilish being ascertained Han Li's cultivation base. The high-grade devilish beings exchanged a few horrified glances before immediately flying away as streaks of black light. In order to not alert Han Li to their escape, They didn't even notify their subordinates of what they were doing. However, with Han Li's immense spiritual sense, he had naturally already spotted these high-grade devilish beings. As soon as they attempted to flee the scene, he cast a frosty gaze toward them. "You're dreaming if you think you can get away." As soon as his voice trailed off, Han Li made a grabbing motion with his pristine white hand, and spatial fluctuations erupted in the air above the high-grade devilish beings, following which a giant five-colored hand that was over 100 feet in size abruptly appeared before swooping downward. The high-grade devilish beings were horrified to see this, and they accelerated with all their might while releasing all types of treasures to attack the giant hand. They weren't actually expecting their treasures to destroy the hand. They were simply hoping to delay it slightly and buy themselves some time for escape. However, in the instant that the treasures struck the massive hand, the hand immediately exploded into a vast expanse of five-colored glacial flames that encompassed an area of around an acre. The five-colored glacial light swept downward, and the five high-grade devilish beings were all instantly frozen solid. Only then did the devilish beings that had surrounded Han Li realize what was happening, and they immediately flew into a blind panic. However, before they had a chance to retreat, Han Li swept his sleeves through the air to release several tens of small azure swords, all of which transformed into streaks of azure sword chi. He then let loose a low cry and made a hand seal, sending the streaks of sword chi flying in all directions. Around 10 minutes later, not a single living devilish being remained in the entire devilish stronghold. Letter 1D627, letter 1D45F, letter 1D452, letter 1D452, letter 1D638, letter 1D626, letter 1D624, letter 1D630, letter 1D4C2. A streak of azure light circled around high up in the air, then flew back toward human territory. Several days later, the Wood Tribe scouts discovered what had happened here, and they were naturally filled with elation. After doing some further scouting to ascertain that this wasn't some kind of trap, they immediately hurried back to report the situation. 7 or 8 days later, the devilish stronghold was taken over by Wood Tribe beings, who began to set up some kind of profound formation at the exit of the node in an attempt to completely seal it off. Of course, none of this had anything to do with Han Li. He was currently refining the chaotic yin-yang qi within his body, while quickly flying back toward human territory. Even though he had only refined a small portion of the chaotic yin-yang qi, his magic power had been greatly enhanced, and he had benefited immensely. He estimated that the chaotic yin-yang qi should be close to fully refined by the time he returned to the human race, and that would take him to the pinnacle of the mid-body integration stage. After that, he would be able to make a breakthrough to the late-body integration stage, but for that, he would require the Ice Phoenix's assistance. Otherwise, Han Li would have settled somewhere in the primordial world to make his breakthrough instead. After all, the human territory was rife with devilish invaders, and it certainly wasn't a very safe place. With that in mind, Han Li could only heave a resigned sigh and continue onward. Meanwhile, there were groups of human warriors and cultivators situated atop the city wall of Deep Heaven City, controlling their treasures with all their might to attack the devilish army outside of the city's restrictions. An extremely fierce battle was taking place, and similar scenes were unfolding all throughout the human and demon territories. During the recent period of time, the devilish army had suddenly become a lot more ferocious and began to launch wave after wave of fierce assaults without any regard for the casualties they suffered. Countless low-grade and mid-grade human and demonic beings had perished during these intense battles, and the number of casualties among high-grade cultivators at or above the deity transformation stage was also spiking drastically. This made both races extremely nervous and apprehensive. During past devilish tribulations, these cities should be fine after withstanding a few years of attacks from the devilish army. As such, all of the cities were using everything at their disposal to ward off the attacks, eagerly hoping for the arrival of the day when the devilish army would run out of steam. Unbeknownst to everyone, there were currently around a dozen human and demonic body integration stage beings gathered on a mysterious island situated on the border of the human and demon territories. At present, all of them were discussing a secretive matter in a hall that was surrounded by layer upon layer of restrictions. So the elder devil race is planning to conquer our territory, then settle permanently in the spirit realm. An elderly man with snowy white hair mused with furrowed brows. That's not the extent of it. The scouts that we sent into the elder devil race have discovered that a huge group of low-grade elder devils have been mobilized, and they're about to force their way into the spirit realm soon, a red-haired middle-aged man said with a dark expression. Low-grade elder devils, approximately how many have been mobilized? Someone sighed before asking. We don't have an accurate figure, but it's going to be at least 1 billion, the red-haired man replied after a brief pause. 1 billion. Everyone gathered in the hall was astonished to hear this. Is this figure really reliable? There aren't that many pure elder devils in the entire elder devil realm. 1 billion will comprise of close to 10% of all of the elder devils in the elder devil realm. How are the sacred ancestors willing to take such a huge risk? A white-robed elderly woman asked. The information we've received is definitely reliable. Many of the cities inhabited by the elder devils have already been completely vacated. 1 billion is already only a conservative estimate, the red-haired man replied in a confident manner. HMPH, it looks like those devilish beings are preparing for an all-or-nothing invasion. It's a pity that we were unable to ascertain the reason behind their act of desperation, even after we sent so many scouts into the elder devil realm to investigate. Otherwise, we'll be able to target them much more effectively, the white-haired elderly man sighed. It seems that only the sacred ancestors are aware of the reason behind this desperate devilish invasion. Even the average devilish lord has been kept completely in the dark. We've taken huge risks in the past to capture devilish lords alive, but we've been unable to glean any relevant information even after using soul search techniques on them, the white-robed woman said in a resigned manner. HMPH, regardless of why the elder devil race is doing this, we definitely can't allow them to do as they please. The backup measures we've prepared have all been implemented, and 2 of them are mostly complete. They should be enough to put a severe dent in the devilish army. Even if the true bodies of some sacred ancestors were to descend into the spirit realm, it won't make any difference. Only matter of concern is that our sources have confirmed that the 3 patriarchs of the elder devil race will descend into the spirit realm together. If that happens, even if all of the grand ascension stage beings of our races join forces, we most likely won't be a match for them. I've heard that all of the 3 patriarchs are old monsters who have lived for hundreds of thousands of years and are only 1 step away from ascending to become true devils, the red-haired man said with furrowed brows. Everyone's expressions darkened even further upon hearing this, and the white-robed woman sighed. The 3 patriarchs of the elder devil race are all tribulation transcendent stage ancient devils. Even in the entire spirit realm, there won't be many beings who can defeat them, let alone our races. The only beings that would be capable of defeating those patriarchs would be the true spirits revered by the major races, but our races are far too weak. Where are we going to find a true spirit that would be willing to help us? If we can't find a way to counter the 3 patriarchs, our fate will be sealed even if we can withstand the attacks from the devilish army. Just as everyone was beginning to exchange concerned glances, a clean-shaven man suddenly spoke for the first time. There's no need to be overly concerned. Back when Master Mojangly left the Holy Island, he said that he would seek out the grand ascension stage beings of the other races to devise a way to counter the devilish patriarchs. A long time has passed since then. Perhaps they've already found a way. Is that true, fellow Taoist Zun? Why haven't we ever heard of this? The red-haired man hurriedly asked as a surprised look appeared on his face. Everyone else was also both surprised and elated to hear this. Only Brother Luo and I are aware of. Prior to Senior Mo's departure, he had told us not to reveal this information unless the situation demanded it, so we never mentioned it to anyone. Now, the situation seems to be dire enough for me to divulge this information, the clean-shaven man sighed. Is that true, Brother Luo? The white-robed woman immediately turned to the elderly man for confirmation. He, fellow Taoist Zun speaks the truth. Senior Mo did indeed inform the 2 of us of this prior to his departure, the white-haired elderly man confirmed with a smile. That's great. That must mean that Senior Mo already has a plan. It looks there's a good chance we'll be able to transcend this devilish tribulation in the end. Everyone was very relieved to hear this, and they immediately began to discuss this new information among themselves. All right, before we begin discussing specific arrangements, I have something that I need to announce. Fellow Taoist Black Rain, who departed from the Holy Island not long ago to capture the Pipe Dream Stone Spirit, has, unfortunately, perished. He had been accompanied by Tian Chan of the Holy Sovereign City, who informed us that they had parted ways after the Pipe Dream Stone Spirit had been captured. However, not long after that, fellow Taoist Black Rain's soul lamp was snuffed out, the red-haired man said with a grim expression. The elation in everyone's eyes immediately faded upon hearing this. Master Black Rain is a mid-body integration cultivator. How was he killed so quickly? Could there be some foul play involved here? The clean-shaven man asked in a suspicious manner. I don't think so. The pipe dream stone spirit is indeed extremely rare, but it's not very useful to the average person. On top of that, fellow Taoist Tian Chan mentioned a witness. At the time, they just so happened to encounter another body integration stage fellow Taoist who helped them capture the stone spirit. Without his assistance, it wouldn't have been so easy for them to capture the stone spirit, the red-haired man replied with a shake of his head. A witness? Who is it? Is it someone else from the Holy Sovereign City? The elderly woman asked with furrowed brows. No, come to think of it, I'm sure most of you have heard of him. The other witness is fellow Taoist Han, who progressed to the body integration stage just a few centuries ago, the red-haired man revealed. Are you referring to Hanley? I heard that he's a freakish cultivation prodigy from your human race, who only took several centuries to progress from the deity transformation stage to the early body integration stage, the elderly woman said with a surprised look in her eyes. I'm afraid your information is outdated, fellow Taoist. This fellow Taoist Han is already a mid-body integration cultivator now, the white-haired elderly man chuckled. What? He made another breakthrough. That's way too fast. I had thought that the rumors of his cultivation aptitude were mere hyperbole, but it seems that they were understatements, if anything. The elderly woman was even more astonished now. All of the other body integration stage beings presented were also quite stunned to hear this. Perhaps, if it weren't for the ongoing devilish tribulation, fellow Taoist Han would have most likely already become a member of our holy island. Setting that aside for now, have you tracked down fellow Taoist Han to ascertain the details of what happened to fellow Taoist Black Rain? The white-haired elderly man asked. I tried to do that, but after getting into contact with Deep Heaven City, I was told that fellow Taoist Han had disappeared. It seems that that time of his disappearance coincides with that of fellow Taoist Black Rain's death, the red-haired man replied with a wry smile. He disappeared. The elderly man's expression darkened upon hearing this. According to the information we received from Deep Heaven City, fellow Taoist Han encountered the clone of a sacred ancestor while reinforcing Heavenly City, and he had gone missing after that. However, according to fellow Taoist Tian Chan, fellow Taoist Han had most likely encountered Tian Chan and Black Rain after he had escaped from the clone of that sacred ancestor. However, after the three joined forces to capture the stone spirits, Tian Chan was the only one who returned safely to the Holy Sovereign City, while the other two both went missing, the red-haired man said. With fellow Taoist Han's aptitude, there may be hope for him to reach the Grand Ascension stage in the future. It would truly be a pity if something has happened to him. However, cultivators like us are constantly defying the natural order anyway, so it's common for us to die early, especially during this devilish tribulation. The elderly woman sighed in a wistful manner. If fellow Taoist Han really has perished, then he can only lament his ill fortune. However, in contrast with Black Rain, fellow Taoist Han didn't leave behind a soul lamp in Deep Heaven City, so it's impossible to tell whether he's currently alive or not. Regardless of how Black Rain perished, the problem is that the pipe dream stone spirit that he captured has also disappeared. Without that stone spirit, the first step of our preparations can't be implemented. This is a pressing matter that concerns the survival of our two races, so we have to think of a way to rectify the issue right away, the red-haired man said with a grim expression. This is indeed an urgent matter. Is there anywhere else where we can find another pipe dream stone spirit? Can we replace the pipe dream stone spirit with something else? Do we not have a backup plan prepared in case of this exact situation? Everyone quickly began to offer their opinions and insights. A pipe dream stone spirit is far from easy to find. The one that we sent fellow Taoist Black Rain to capture was one that was discovered tens of thousands of years ago. As for substitutes, we did indeed prepare a few, but resorting to those substitutes will hamper our preparations, and it's hard to say whether we'll be able to achieve the intended effect in the end, the red-haired man said. Everyone fell silent upon hearing this, and a tense silence descended over the entire hall. Leave the pipe dream stone spirit to me. I have more important matters that I'll require your assistance with, fellow Taoists. A faint male voice suddenly echoed throughout the hall, and everyone was rather bewildered to hear it. An ecstatic look immediately appeared on the red-haired man's face, and he sprang up from his chair as he exclaimed, "Senior Ao Zio, is that you?" Almost at the exact same moment, the gate of the hall was opened from the outside, and two people strode into the hall one after another. The first person was a man who appeared to be in his 30s with a faint smile on his face. He wore a set of silver robes and had a head of long black hair that trailed down to his waist. Behind him was a stunning silver-haired beauty with skin as fair as snow, and shimmering silver locks that looked as if they had been forged from pure silver. We pay our respects to Senior Aozio, and welcome Senior Aozio to the Holy Island. All of the people in the hall were ecstatic to see the silver-robed man, and they hurriedly rose to their feet before extending respectful bows. This man was the only grand ascension stage being of the demon race, the vastly renowned patriarch Aozio. No need for formalities. I can see that there's a mix of familiar faces and ones that I'm only now seeing for the first time here, the silver-robed man said with a smile. Please take a seat, Senior Aozio, the white-haired elderly man said as he hurriedly vacated the main seat in the hall. Patriarch Aozio nodded before taking a step forward, and everyone felt their vision blur before he somehow appeared in front of the chair, then calmly took a seat. The silver-haired woman also strode into the hall and stood behind Patriarch Aozio, completely ignoring everyone's bewildered eyes. The white-haired elderly swept his spiritual sense toward the woman to find that she was a late spatial tempering stage demonic cultivator, and he couldn't help but ask, "May I ask who this is?" "This is my granddaughter, Ling Long. You may not have met her before, but I'm sure you've heard of her," Patriarch Aozio replied. A hint of surprise flashed through the elderly man's eyes upon hearing this, and he said in a polite manner, "Oh, it's Fairy Ling Long. Please forgive me for my rudeness." Indeed, this woman was none other than Silvermoon, who had parted ways with Han Li in the human world over 1,000 years ago. Of course, this Silvermoon was different from the Silvermoon of the past. She had fused the split soul and possessed the complete soul of Silvermoon. Everyone else was also rather surprised to hear who this woman was. The Holy Island held a very special status among both the human and demon races, so the beings on the island naturally paid close attention to the 7 demon monarchs that ruled over the demon race. Fairy Ling Long was Wolf Monarch Tian Qi's concubine, and she had once been sealed in the human world for many years. All of the elders of the Holy Island had heard about how her relationship with Wolf Monarch Tian Qi had become rather strained following her return to the spirit realm, even though this was only the first time that they had met her. Silvermoon paid no heed to this, and merely stood in silence behind Patriarch Aozio with her head slightly lowered. "Senior Aozio, to what do we owe this pleasure? Have you recovered from your last tribulation transcendence?" the red-haired man asked in a respectful manner. "My last tribulation transcendence was indeed a bit of an ordeal, but after resting for so many years, I've already completely recovered. Otherwise, I wouldn't have appeared here. As for why I came to the Holy Island, I was naturally invited here by fellow Taoist Mo," Patriarch Aozio said with a faint smile. "Does this mean you've already met Senior Mo? That's fantastic news. He also fell completely into obscurity after leaving the Holy Island all those years ago, and we've been very concerned about him," the clean-shaven man said as an ecstatic look appeared in his eyes. He's not even as old as I am. There's no need to be concerned for him. All right, I won't waste any further time with my rambling. On this occasion, I was asked to come here by fellow Taoist Mo to deliver a message for him, and also to remain on the island for a while," Patriarch Aozio said. The clean-shaven man's heart stirred upon hearing this, and he asked in a respectful manner, "What message does Senior Mo have for us?" Fellow Taoist Mo recently received news that the location of the Holy Island seems to have been leaked to the Elder Devil race. The devilish army currently doesn't possess the power to pose a threat to the Holy Island yet, but we still have to take some precautions just in case. The Holy Island holds an extremely important status in our two races. If something were to happen to this place, morale would plummet to an unsalvageable degree," Patriarch Aozio said as a grim look appeared on his face. "The location of the Holy Island has been leaked again, but that's impossible. The Holy Island only just teleported to a new location. It won't be able to teleport again in the near future," one of the body integration stage beings present exclaimed. "There's no need to panic. I'll be here to hold down the fort. The fact that the location of the Holy Island was leaked again in such a short time indicates that a devilish spy has most likely infiltrated the island. However, the spy shouldn't be very troublesome to track down. We just have to investigate all of the people who have entered the island since the commencement of the devilish tribulation to find the culprit," Patriarch Aozio said in a cold voice. The white-haired elderly man's heart jolted upon hearing this, and he hurriedly cupped his fist in a salute as he said, "I'll organize some people to conduct an investigation right away." Patriarch Alzio nodded in response, and after a brief pause, he said something that came as quite a surprise to everyone. "The other message that fellow Taoist Mo wanted me to relay is that we need to adjust the countermeasures we've originally prepared against the devilish army." "Why is that?" "Those countermeasures are all powerful trump cards that took us and Senior Mo over 100 years to devise. Surely there won't be any issues with them?" the elderly woman asked. "This is most likely a decision that fellow Taoist Mo made after meeting the Grand Ascension stage fellow Taoists of the other races. I presume he must have identified some fallacies in the original countermeasures that had been prepared through his communication with those fellow Taoists. Rest assured, this doesn't require everything to be torn down and redone anew. Only 2 or 3 of the countermeasures will need to be adjusted. I'll disclose the specific details to all of you later." Coincidentally, one of the adjustments that need to be made makes the pipe dream stone spirit redundant, as fellow Taoist Mo has already decided to substitute it with something else. This substitute will only produce a better effect than what it originally would have been, and I've brought the substitute along with me. Patriarch Alzio flipped a hand over as he spoke to produce a jade vial, which he tossed toward the white-haired elderly man. The elderly man caught the box before removing the lid in a befuddled manner, upon which a stunned look appeared on his face. "This is—" Patriarch Alzio raised a hand to cut the elderly man off. "If you know what it is, then keep it to yourself. It's best to have as little people know about this thing as possible for now." The other Holy Island elders were quite curious about what was in the box, but it was naturally inappropriate for them to pry into such matters. The elderly man hurriedly gave an affirmative response before carefully stowing the jade box up his sleeve. The elderly woman hesitated momentarily before asking, "By the way, Senior, have you heard that there's a chance the 3 devilish patriarchs could descend into our spirit realm?" "I have indeed heard of this, and it was fellow Taoist Mo who informed me of this in person," Patriarch Alzio replied in a calm manner. His calm display instilled everyone in the hall with a lot of confidence, and a hint of elation appeared in the elderly woman's eyes as she asked, "Does this mean you've already thought of a countermeasure against them, Senior?" As opposed to giving a definitive response, Patriarch Alzio waved a hand and replied in a nonchalant manner, "He, even the average sacred ancestor has to expend a vast amount of power to get their true body to descend into the spirit realm, let alone the 3 devilish patriarchs. It won't be that easy for them to make their way into this realm. It's still too early to be discussing something like this. We can consider it after we deal with the current threat posed by the devilish army." All of the body integration stage beings present were left exchanging befuddled glances upon hearing this. The white-haired elderly man cleared his throat and gave the red-haired man a meaningful look. The red-haired man seemed to have been reminded of something upon seeing the elderly man's silent signals, and he hurriedly changed the subject. "Indeed, it's still too early to be discussing the 3 devilish patriarchs. Would you like to hear about some of the specific measures we've prepared on the Holy Island, Senior Alzio? There are some issues that we're unable to resolve, and will require a verdict from you." A hint of a smile appeared on Patriarch Alzio's face as he nodded in response. "Sure, go ahead." "Firstly, in order to deal with those low-grade devilish beasts, we've been nurturing an army of spirit beasts, and that army is basically complete. We've also begun breeding some ferocious insects with shorter lifespans, and they should just about reach maturity once our final battle against the devilish army commences. Also, in order to refine those profound heavenly holy artifacts, we've moved all of the tool refinement masters of our human race onto the island, and they should be able to begin refining the treasures in about half a year. The only matter of concern is that there are several types of materials that are still yet to be delivered to the island, and they'll only be able to get to us after passing through several areas currently controlled by the devilish beings. Hence, we have to decide on someone to send out to receive the materials. I suggest." The red-haired man seemed to be responsible for taking care of all general matters on the island, and Patriarch Alzio listened in silence to his report. His expression remained completely unchanged, but the contemplative look in his eyes suggested that he was considering all of the matters that were being raised. After the red-haired man finished, some of the other people in the hall also stepped forward to report some other matters. Only after 2 hours had passed did everyone finish delivering their reports. After hearing what everyone had to say, Patriarch Alzio didn't make a single decision. Instead, he suddenly rose to his feet with a smile and said, "It sounds like you've all done quite well. These are all matters that you can take care of on your own. There's no need for an old geezer like me to go around barking orders. I'm rather weary from my journey to get here, so I'll be going to rest now." Everyone else exchanged a few wide-eyed glances upon hearing this. The red-haired man was the first to react, and he hurriedly rose to his feet before extending a respectful bow. "In that case, please allow me to organize a place for you to stay, Senior." Patriarch Alzio nodded before making his way out of the hall in an unhurried manner, followed closely by Silvermoon. Only then did everyone else in the hall react to the situation, and they all stood up to bid Patriarch Alzio farewell. Just as Patriarch Alzio had made it to the entrance of the hall, a thought seemed to suddenly occur to him, and he turned back before pointing at two of the people in the hall as he said, "By the way, you two, come and see me later. I have something to discuss with you." The people that he had pointed to were the white-haired elderly man and a tall and thin man who had barely spoken at all. The two of them faltered slightly before hurriedly giving an affirmative response. Patriarch Alzio nodded before departing from the hall, and as soon as he left, a middle-aged woman who appeared to be in her 40s turned to the tall and thin man before asking, "Do you know Patriarch Alzio, fellow Taoist Su?" "One of my seniors is an old acquaintance of Senior Ao's, so I did see him from afar a few times," the man replied in an ambiguous manner. "Oh, then do you know why Senior Ao could be looking for you?" the middle-aged woman asked. "How would I know? I'm just as confused as you are, fellow Taoist. Also, Senior Ao didn't just ask to see me on my own. He instructed both myself and Brother Luo to go and see him, so he must have something to tell us," the man replied with a shake of his head. The middle-aged woman merely smiled and didn't pry any further into the matter. Following Patriarch Alzio's departure, the rest of the people in the hall didn't have any intention of staying behind, either. After continuing their discussion for a short while longer, the white-haired elderly man announced the conclusion of the meeting, and everyone departed from the hall. Meanwhile, the red-haired man had already taken Patriarch Alzio and Silvermoon to a secluded area on the island. Not only was this the area on the island with the greatest abundance of spiritual chi, there were 7 or 8 independent pavilions that were spaced out very far apart from one another. Not only were these pavilions extremely intricate and well constructed, they each had a designated tool refinement chamber, pill refinement chamber, and secret chamber for cultivation purposes. After leading Patriarch Alzio to this place, the red-haired man asked him to choose a pavilion himself, only for Patriarch Alzio to merely pick a pavilion at random. The red-haired man naturally didn't dare to state any objections, and after organizing a group of servants for him and Silvermoon, he immediately departed. Patriarch Alzio sat on the main seat in the hall and raised a hand in an expressionless manner to dismiss the servants in the room. Thus, he and Silvermoon were the only people left in the hall. He sat on his chair in silence and narrowed his eyes slightly, seemingly contemplating something. All the while, Silvermoon stood peacefully beside him, content to remain silent as well. "At your current cultivation base, there's no reason why you shouldn't have made a breakthrough to the body integration stage with all of the pills I've given to you. However, you failed thrice in the past century. It seems that the only thing holding you back is your inability to get over your own inner demons. If you fail another breakthrough attempt, then you'll most likely find it very difficult to ever make a breakthrough," Patriarch Alzio suddenly said. Silvermoon lowered her head slightly and replied, "Sorry for disappointing you with my incompetence, grandfather. Looks like it'll be very difficult for you to undo the knot in our heart. Ever since you returned from that lower realm, you've given Tianqi the cold shoulder and even moved in to live with me. I've never forced you to tell me the reason for this, and I haven't forced you to return to Tianqi either, as I wanted you to iron out your own mental state. However, not only has your mental state not improved, the knot in your heart has only grown more convoluted during these past years." Alzio sighed with a shake of his head, and even though the tone he was using was quite benevolent, the faint tinge of disappointment in his voice was still quite apparent. "Grandfather, Tianqi and I." Silvermoon raised her head to argue something, but Patriarch Alzio merely raised a hand to cut her off. "There's no need for you to explain anything. I know what you want to say. Tianqi took advantage of my time in seclusion to break his promise to me, planning to harvest your origin yin physique even before you had reached the body integration stage. He failed to do that, so he employed other underhanded methods to split your soul into two, causing you to suffer through the agony of a split soul for over 1,000 years. After that, you descended into that lower realm, and the tampered with the star-defying plate so that you couldn't return to the spirit realm in time. Do you really need me to run through everything he did?" A furious look suddenly appeared on Patriarch Alzio's face as he spoke, and he slammed his hand down onto the copper armrest of his chair. A burst of white flames flashed, and the armrest was completely erased from existence. "You know about all of this, grandfather." Silvermoon shuddered as her face paled drastically. "HMPH, do you really think I'm so old and senile that I don't even know when someone's mistreating my granddaughter? If it weren't for the fact that I don't have much time left and he's the only junior I can entrust the wolf race to, I would have tortured him to death long ago." Patriarch Alzio harumphed coldly. Silvermoon's face paled even further upon hearing this, and a wry smile appeared on her face as she said, "The blame can't be entirely pinned on him. Technically, I'm his main concubine, and his cultivation base hadn't progressed in many years. He knew that my origin yin physique could help him break through his bottleneck, so it's inevitable that he would try something. You're still speaking out for his sake. Before you married him, you were already the holy maiden of our Silvermoon race. Prior to attaining full mastery of that Silvermoon cultivation art, your lifespan would be significantly cut short if you were to lose your virginity. There's no way that he wouldn't have been aware of this. On top of that, after he married you, he took on many more concubines and never considered your feelings. It seems that ever since he became a demon monarch, he's forgotten that our Silvermoon race is the premier branch of the wolf race. If it weren't for the fact that all of my juniors possess lackluster cultivation aptitude, and none of them have reached the body integration stage, there's no way I would have resorted to assisting an outsider like him to become the wolf monarch." A cold look appeared in Patriarch Alzio's eyes as he spoke. Silvermoon bit down on her lower lip, but heaved a faint sigh and remained silent in the end. "However, following the ordeal that you suffered in that lower realm, you awakened your 7-star moon physique, so that's an unexpected silver lining on the situation. With your past cultivation aptitude, the spatial tempering stage would have been your limit, but with this 7-star moon physique, it's not impossible for you to reach the grand ascension stage in the future. I didn't possess exceptional cultivation aptitude in my youth, either. Only after awakening the same physique was I able to reach my current cultivation base." Patriarch Alzio's eyes gradually began to light up as he spoke. However, Silvermoon's face remained deathly pale as she shook her head in response. "I would rather not have this physique if it means I could have avoided the ordeal I had to go through. I know you've been through a lot these past years, but seeing as you now have the potential to progress to the body integration stage, I can cast aside the inhibitions I once had. Tianqi had better pray that he perishes in battle against the devilish army. Otherwise, once the devilish tribulation ends, I'll subject him to a fate worse than death." Silvermoon's heart jolted with shock upon hearing this. "You don't mean?" Patriarch Alzio continued, "There's no rule prohibiting a woman from becoming one of the 7 demon monarchs. I had always been reluctant to make an outsider the wolf monarch, and Tianqi has betrayed my trust, so I'm naturally going to strip him of the title of wolf monarch." Silvermoon's mouth gaped open upon hearing this, and only after a long while did she murmur in response, "That doesn't seem to be appropriate." Patriarch Alzio reverted back to his usual calm expression, but his voice cooled significantly as he asked, "Why is that? I'm not plotting against Tianqi for no reason. He only has himself to blame for what he's done to you. Are you still harboring feelings toward him?" Silvermoon hesitated momentarily before replying with a wry smile. "Of course, I no longer harbor any feelings for him after what he did to me. It's just that even though I've attained this physique, there's still no guarantee that I'll be able to progress to the body integration stage. If I fail to do so, then our wolf race will still need Tianqi as our leader. Indeed, it seems you won't be able to progress to the body integration stage so long as you're unable to overcome your inner demons. Now that we're in the midst of this devilish tribulation, we can't afford to wait for you to make slow and steady progress. If something were to happen to me during this devilish tribulation, you would be in an extremely perilous situation. So be it, I'll have to make an exception and do something drastic. Take a look at what's in this jade slip." Patriarch Alzio sighed with furrowed brows before suddenly opening his mouth to expel an azure jade slip that hovered towards Silvermoon. Silvermoon was a little perplexed, but she still caught the jade slip before pressing it against her own forehead. After injecting her spiritual sense into the jade slip, she immediately exclaimed, "Art of Indifference." "That's right. This art of indifference is an ancient secret technique that I stumbled upon many years ago. Not only is it extremely powerful, cultivating it will have incredible effects on one's mental state. If you decide to cultivate it, I'll use other secret techniques to help you achieve elementary mastery of this art as quickly as possible. That'll most likely be enough to iron out the flaws in your mental state, and a breakthrough to the body integration stage should be all but assured at that point. However, as the name of the cultivation art suggests, using it will inflict upon your severe side effects. Apparently, as one progresses in this cultivation art, their emotions and desires will gradually fade, and they could even become completely non-existent once full mastery is achieved. That's not too much of an issue, but the most important thing is that the cultivation method of this secret technique is rather extreme, and it'll most likely have a severe impact on your progression to the grand ascension stage in the future. I'll let you weigh up the pros and cons involved for yourself, Patriarch Alzio said with a slightly conflicted expression. Silvermoon's expression changed several times upon hearing this, and she seemed to be rather hesitant. As for Patriarch Alzio, he slowly closed his eyes and didn't say anything further, waiting patiently for Silvermoon to make a decision. After a long while, Silvermoon removed the jade slip from her forehead and lowered her head to contemplate her options. After a while longer, she seemed to have made a decision, and she adopted a serious expression as she asked, "Grandfather, will this secret technique really allow me to progress to the body integration stage prior to our final battle against the devilish army?" Patriarch Alzio reopened his eyes and replied, "I can't make any guarantees, but there's at least a 70% to 80% chance that it will. Otherwise, I wouldn't be bringing it out for your consideration. Having said that, there's no hurry. You can think about this for a few days before getting back to me." Silvermoon opened her mouth to say something, but swallowed her words in the end and replied, "Yes, grandfather." Just as Patriarch Alzio was about to say something further, his expression suddenly changed as he cast his gaze toward the gate of the pavilion. Moments later, the sound of footsteps rang out, and a young female servant appeared outside before informing in a respectful voice, "Master Alzio, there are 2 elders of the island here to see you." "Oh, they sure aren't wasting any time. Tell them to come in," Patriarch Alzio instructed as his expression eased slightly. The servant gave an affirmative response before departing. A short while later, the white-haired elderly man and the man with the Sioux surname strode into the room, and they immediately extended respectful bows at the sight of Patriarch Alzio. "We pay our respects to Senior Alzio. What would you like us to do for you?" Elder Sioux asked. "There's no hurry. Take a seat first," Patriarch Alzio said with a smile as he pointed at the chairs beside him. The 2 elders naturally didn't dare to raise any objections, and they expressed their gratitude before taking a seat as they were told. "Come to think of it, both of you have some ties with me. One of you is a descendant of an old acquaintance of mine, while the other is fellow Taoist Mo's in-name disciple. I have something important that I need to have done, and I only feel comfortable entrusting this task to you too," Patriarch Alzio said in a benevolent manner. The 2 elders were clearly quite flattered to hear this, and Elder Sioux immediately said, "Please tell us what you'd like us to do, Senior." "I heard from fellow Taoist Mo that when he's not on the Holy Island, the onus of leadership falls upon you, fellow Taoist Luo. In that case, I need you to search for some treasures and materials for me. These items are all quite rare. We have leads on the whereabouts of some of them, but you'll have to search for the other ones. My only requirements are that these things have to be gathered in secret, and that they be gathered as quickly as possible," Patriarch Alzio replied. The white-haired elderly man faltered slightly upon hearing this before immediately nodding in agreement. "I'll send out some trustworthy people to gather the items right away, and we'll make sure to keep things strictly confidential." "Good, here is a list of what I want." Patriarch Alzio raised a sleeve as he spoke, and a jade slip flew out from within. The white-haired elderly man immediately stood up and caught the jade slip before stowing it away up his sleeve without even looking at it, showing through his actions that he was going to do his best to track the items in the jade slip regardless of what they were. A pleased look appeared on Patriarch Alzio's face upon seeing this, and he turned to Elder Sioux next. "Junior Sioux, I need you to take a trip to the primordial world to meet a few mighty figures from the other races. As for what you need to do after you meet up with them, that's all recorded in this jade slip. Make sure to keep what you're doing a secret from the rest of the island as well." "I'll be sure to do so," Elder Sioux replied in a respectful manner as he also rose to his feet. "These 2 tasks concern the 3 devilish patriarchs, and fellow Taoist Mo is aware of them as well. I'll only give you a maximum of 5 years to complete these tasks. If you exceed that time limit, severe consequences could follow. Do you understand?" A serious look appeared on Patriarch Alzaio's face as he spoke. The two body integration stage elders were ecstatic to hear that countermeasures were being prepared against the devilish patriarchs, and they exchanged an elated glance before vowing, "Rest assured, Senior, we'll be sure to complete the tasks in time even if it costs us our lives." "All right, that's all for now. Go and get started on that right away, and make sure the tasks are completed as soon as possible," Patriarch Alzaio instructed as he raised a hand to toss another jade slip toward Elder Su. The two elders didn't dare to say anything further, and they both extended respectful bows before departing from the pavilion. Letter 1D4BB, letter 1D633, letter 1D626, letter 1D626, letter 1D638, letter 212F, letter 1D624, letter 1D45C, letter 1D628. Following their departure, Silvermoon's brows furrowed slightly as she asked, "Grandfather, are those two trustworthy? Aren't there already devilish spies who have infiltrated the Holy Island?" If even these two are untrustworthy, then no one is trustworthy. They were recommended to be by Mo Jianli as neither of them have left the Holy Island in the past 1,000 years. Besides, if they really were devilish spies, do you think I would have failed to identify them? At the very least, there shouldn't be any major issues with the Holy Island elders that we saw earlier, and that's already very good news, Patriarch Alzaio replied with a faint smile. Silvermoon's expression eased slightly upon hearing this, and she extended a curtsy toward Patriarch Alzaio as she said, "In that case, it seems I was overthinking things. I'll be going to rest now." Patriarch Alzaio nodded with a tender look in his eyes. "Go on. We've been traveling for several months, so you're indeed in need of some rest." "You have some rest too, grandfather. You only just recently recovered from your tribulation transcendence. Don't pile too much work on yourself," Silvermoon replied. "Haha, do you really think I've become a useless old man?" Alzaio chuckled in a nonchalant manner. Silvermoon smiled and said, "Not at all. With your current appearance, no one would bat an eyelid even if I were to claim that you were my brother. You're far from an old man." After that, she turned and strode out of the room, and her sprightly footsteps indicated that her mood had improved significantly. Following Silvermoon's departure, Patriarch Alzaio's smile faded, and he sighed to himself, "I really hope she doesn't decide to cultivate that art of indifference." Despite what he was saying, he displayed no intention to go after Silvermoon and merely closed his eyes as he began to meditate in his chair. After a while he opened his eyes and suddenly said, "Show yourself." "I pay my respects to Master Alzaio." A female voice rang out nearby, and spatial fluctuations erupted, following which a semi-transparent figure appeared several tens of feet away from Patriarch Alzaio. The figure then gradually became clearer and revealed itself to be a slender woman in a tight-fitting black robe. She wore a copper wolf-head mask, and her hands were also sheathed in a pair of black gloves, so she wasn't revealing even a single sliver of skin. "Welcome back, Liao Ying. Even after so many years, this get-up of yours still hasn't changed at all," Patriarch Alzaio said as a hint of amusement appeared in his eyes. The woman extended a respectful curtsy as she replied, "You also look like you haven't aged a single day, Master. I had been concerned for a long time after I heard that you had been injured during your tribulation transcendence. It's quite a relief to see that you're safe and well." A mere heavenly tribulation isn't enough to kill me. All right, setting aside the pleasantries for now, I ordered to stay on the Holy Island in secret as a safety precaution. Now, I need you to give me a specific rundown of the situation on the Holy Island. I'm going to be staying here for some time, so I have to familiarize myself with the true situation on the island," Patriarch Alzaio said as a serious look appeared on his face. The woman immediately did as she was told and commenced her report. "The current situation on the Holy Island is not very optimistic, and that's mainly due to the devilish." Patriarch Alzaio listened intently to her report and asked questions for further elaboration whenever there was something that he didn't quite understand. The woman would give an answer if she had one, or merely shake her head in response to the questions that she didn't know the answer to. At the conclusion of her report, the woman abruptly fell silent, while Patriarch Alzaio sat in his chair with a contemplative expression. Finally, Patriarch Alzaio nodded with a pleased expression before continuing, "You've done very well, Liao Ying. The years you spent on the Holy Island certainly haven't gone to waste. Is there any update on the person that I asked you to look into last time?" The woman's brows furrowed slightly, and she was silent for a moment before replying in a truthful manner. "I've done my best to gather information on that man, but he hasn't ever set foot on the Holy Island, and there are many rumors about him, but very little detailed information that I could find. On top of that, he seems to be very focused on his cultivation and rarely interacts with anyone, which is probably why he was able to make such extraordinary progress in his cultivation base in such a short time. I've already organized all of the information that I have on him. Would you like me give it all to you now? Most of the information I have are unsubstantiated rumors, so do take care when reading through it. Regardless of whether the information is real or not, I have to take a look at it. It's only been less than 2,000 years since he ascended to the spirit realm, and he's already forged such a resounding reputation for himself. Most importantly, he's the main factor behind the flaws in Ling Long's mental state. Let me see exactly what makes him so special, Patriarch Alzio said as a cold look appeared in his eyes. The black-robed woman gave an affirmative response before raising a hand to release a ball of azure light. Patriarch Alzio made a grabbing motion and to draw the ball of azure light into his hand, then injected his spiritual sense into it. After a short while, he finished examining the information, but seemed to be rather displeased by what he had seen. Why is there so little information? And most of this stuff is downright absurd. You're telling me that he was able to match a late body integration cultivator in battle at just the early body integration stage. Do you even believe this yourself? I've merely gathered all of the information on him that I could find. You'll have to decide whether the information is real or not. After all, you never ordered me to track him in person to gather more information, and now it's too late. He was hunted by devilish beings not long ago and has since disappeared, the woman replied in a serious manner. He disappeared. Is that true? HMPH, what a lucky little brat. His name is Han Li, right? How dare a mere ascended cultivator like him disrupt Ling Long's mental state? Because of him, she's been unable to make a breakthrough that should have come easily to her. He deserves to be killed thousands of times for what he's done, Patriarch Alzio said as a hint of killing intent flashed through his eyes. If you really want him dead and he manages to return alive, I can take him out in your stead. That way, no one will be able to link his death to you, the woman suggested in a cold voice. Patriarch Alzio shook his head without any hesitation. There's no need for that. The masked woman seemed to know a lot about Silvermoon's situation, and she asked in a slightly surprised manner, why is that? Has young Mistress Ling Long already been made aware of his existence? I've kept all news of this man a secret from her this entire time, and she's constantly been by my side, so she hasn't had any interaction with the outside world. However, she suddenly received news about this man a while back from a friend of hers, and thus, she was made aware that he had ascended into the spirit realm and become a body integration cultivator. That's why she insisted on coming with me on this trip. If something happens to that Han brat, she'll inevitably suspect my involvement even if there's no evidence, and that would make it even more difficult for her to iron out her mental state. Of course, if he perishes by the hands of devilish beings, then that would be a different story altogether, Patriarch Alzio explained. That makes things rather troublesome. However, it's not impossible for me to make it so that he does perish by the hands of devilish beings. The masked woman chuckled in response, seemingly very eager to have Han Li killed. Don't even think about it. No means no. Our battle against the devilish army is about to commence. All body integration cultivators are extremely valuable resources that can't be expended without good reason. Otherwise, I would have killed Tian Kui already. In comparison with that Han brat, I'm far more eager to see him dead, Patriarch Alzio commanded in an implacable voice. In that case, I won't meddle in this matter. Having said that, I really am very interested in this so-called freakish cultivation prodigy, the masked woman chuckled. Liao Ying, how many years have you been a shadow guard of mine? Patriarch Alzio suddenly asked. The masked woman faltered slightly upon hearing this before asking in a surprised manner, around 50,000 to 60,000 years now. Why do you ask, master? Back when I saved you from that spatial storm, you vowed to serve me for 100,000 years and signed a 100,000-year soul contract with me. I intend to transfer the remaining on the contract to Ling Long. What do you think? Patriarch Alzio asked in a serious voice. Master Alzio, I signed that soul contract as I was grateful to you for saving my life, but the main factor contributing to my decision was the fact that you're a grand ascension cultivator. Otherwise, I would have repaid you through an alternate method. The woman's brows furrowed slightly with displeasure upon hearing this. So the only reason you're against this is because Ling Long's cultivation base is lacking, Patriarch Alzio asked in a calm voice. Indeed, I've watched Ling Long grow up from a little girl, and I've become quite attached to her. As such, I would be more than willing to serve her, but her cultivation base is a little too lackluster. At the very least, she has to be at the body integration stage before I can consider this. As you know, there are some rules among us Liao beasts that even I can't go against, the woman sighed in a rather forlorn manner. Patriarch Alzio smiled and said, if that's the only issue, then you can rest assured. Ling Long will be able to progress to the body integration stage within the next century, and there's even a chance that she could reach the grand ascension stage in the future. What do you mean by that, Master Alzio? The masked woman asked as a hint of bewilderment flashed through her eyes. I haven't told you this yet, but Ling Long has already awakened the seven-star moon physique. Do you think what I'm saying is an exaggeration now? In order to avoid potential mishaps, I haven't revealed this information to anyone else, Patriarch Alzio said in a solemn manner. The masked woman contemplated the situation in silence for a while before nodding in a slightly reluctant manner. I see. In that case, I would be open to considering this, but I'll have to verify everything for myself. Patriarch Alzio's expression eased upon hearing this, and said, good. With you by Ling Long's side, I won't have to worry about her before she reaches the height of her powers. Let's not drag this out for too long. I'll prove to you that Ling Long has awakened the seven-star moon physique and transfer the soul contract over to her within the next few days. The masked woman nodded before asking, I'm naturally willing to cooperate, but may I ask why you're in such a hurry, Master Alzio? Could it be that you're preparing backup options for young Mistress Ling Long as you're not confident in the upcoming battle? If I didn't have any confidence, then I wouldn't have made this trip in person. I don't know what the Elder Devil race is planning, but with the Grand Ascension stage beings of the other races on our side, we have a good chance of securing victory. I can't disclose any further details than that, but it's necessary for me to take some precautionary measures. Even without this devilish tribulation, I won't be able to withstand my next heavenly tribulation anyway, so I have to start thinking for the future when I'm gone, Patriarch Alzio said with a nonchalant smile. The masked woman's heart stirred upon hearing this, but she didn't say anything further. After a while, Patriarch Alzio continued, there's nothing else I need you to take care of for now, so you can go. We're going to begin investigations to weed out the devilish spies on the island soon. Make sure you don't get discovered. Otherwise, the ensuing misunderstanding could lead to a lot of trouble. At the very least, you'll no longer be able to use your current false identity. Yes, Master, I'll be taking my leave now. The masked woman nodded before her body gradually turned transparent again, and she vanished amid a burst of faint spatial fluctuations. Following her departure, Patriarch Alzio sat in silence by himself for a while longer before heaving a faint sigh and closing his eyes again. Meanwhile, in a small mountain range close to 100,000 kilometers away from Deep Heaven City, there was a group of red-robed human cultivators hiding on a mountain summit while appraising an extremely secluded small canyon in the distance. The group of cultivators was comprised of men and women of all ages, and there were a few elderly men and women among them who possessed immense magic power. However, all of them were looking rather worse for wear and seemed to have only arrived here after a long journey. Letter 1D4F, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D4E, letter 1D65A, letter 1D66C, letter 1D4E, letter 1D48F, letter 1D484, letter 1D490, letter 1D4F6. An elderly man with two longswords strapped to his back withdrew his gaze before turning to an elderly man beside him with a scar on his face. Junior Marshal Brother Lee, are you sure that there's a teleportation formation in that canyon that'll take us directly to Deep Heaven City? Rest assured, Senior Marshal Brother, this teleportation formation is designated for elders of Deep Heaven City, so extremely few people know about it. I only heard about it as one of my old acquaintances is a heavenly guard looking after the formation, and he unintentionally revealed its existence to me during a drunken rant. The scarred elderly man immediately replied. I wouldn't be so confident. It's been quite a long time since those devils took over this area. Even the most secluded of teleportation formations could have been tracked down by now, the elderly man said with a concerned shake of his head. The problem is that Deep Heaven City has been sealed off by the devilish beings now, and it would be nothing short of suicide to try and reach it directly. Junior Marshal Brother Lee's suggestion is our only hope, a hideous elderly woman interjected. The sword-bearing elderly man gritted his teeth and said, Indeed, Junior Marshal's sister, we have no alternatives. If we keep hiding out in the open like this, then our Huo Lee sect will inevitably be hunted down eventually. Only by making it into Deep Heaven City will we be able to ensure that the heritage of our sect gets passed on. We have no choice but to take a risk." The scarred elderly man was ecstatic to hear this. "You've definitely made the right decision, senior martial brother. In the past, even the 3 sovereign cities have been conquered during previous devilish tribulations. Only Deep Heaven City has a spotless track record. If we can get into the city, then we'll be saved for sure. I'll send some disciples to scout the area right away." "There's no need for that. If the devilish beings have set up traps around the area, then normal disciples most likely won't be able to discover them. It would be best if we made a trip there ourselves. Even if we do end up falling into a trap, ordinary devilish beings won't be able to stop us anyway," the sword-bearing elderly man countered. "All right, we'll do as you say then, senior martial brother. Junior martial brother Lee and I will come along with you," the elderly woman agreed after a brief moment of contemplation. "No, you stay behind, junior martial sister. Your powers are only second only to mine in our sect, so we have to keep you here as a backup option. If something happens, don't wait for us. Get away from here with the disciples right away. Junior martial brother Lee, junior martial brother Yang, you two can come with me. One of you has information about the teleportation formation, and the other is adept in the art of formations, so both of you possess useful skill sets," the sword-bearing elderly man instructed. The scarred elderly man and a refined elderly scholar immediately gave affirmative responses. Thus, after issuing a few more instructions, the sword-bearing elderly man departed for the canyon with his 2 junior martial brothers. The remaining human cultivators looked on from their hiding spots with nervous expressions. Unbeknownst to them, there was a faint streak of azure light that was also hurtling toward the same target several thousand kilometers away. Within the streak of azure light was a young man who appeared to be in his 20s, and he was currently fiddling around with a miniature black mountain in his hands. On his shoulders sat a little girl who appeared to be around 3 or 4 years of age. She had delicate fair skin and an adorably chubby little face. She had one hand grabbing onto Han Li's robes and an unknown spirit that she was munching on in her other hand. Han Li turned to glance at the little girl sitting on his shoulders, and a faint smile appeared on his face. The little girl was none other than the leopard Kirin beast that had just awakened. During his journey back to human territory, the leopard Kirin beast had finally awakened, and in the process, it gave him an unexpected surprise. As soon as it had awakened, it had commenced its body integration stage, tribulation transcendence. It possessed the bloodline of the true spirit Kirin, so the heavenly tribulation that befell was naturally extremely devastating. An outsider couldn't step in during one's tribulation transcendence, so Han Li could only watch as the leopard Kirin beast was almost destroyed during the tribulation. Thankfully, after devouring the demon core of that dark beast monarch, it had managed to attain several new abilities that allowed it to just barely transcend its tribulation, and it was now able to manifest a human form. At the time, the leopard Kirin beast had been in extremely dire condition, and Han Li had expended countless spirit pills to save its life. Otherwise, it would have already perished. However, what left Han Li feeling rather speechless was that the human form manifested by the leopard Kirin beast was a little girl who appeared to be even younger than Quir. If it were a normal person, it most likely wouldn't even be able to talk much yet. Thankfully, despite its appearance, the leopard Kirin beast was able to directly communicate with him through spiritual sense, so communication wasn't an issue. Due to its unexpected tribulation transcendence, Han Li's trip back to Deep Heaven City was naturally delayed a little. As such, it had taken him several months to reach this point. Letter 1D65B, Letter 1D493, Letter 1D4E, Letter 1D65A, Letter 1D500, Letter 1D486, Letter 1D658, Letter 1D490, Letter 1D4AT. The place that he was currently traveling toward was one of the few hidden teleportation formations designated for the elders of Deep Heaven City. Due to the fact that this was a small formation that could only teleport a maximum of 2 people at a time, Deep Heaven City wasn't concerned about devilish beings discovering it and invading the city through it. After all, even if 2 body integration stage devilish lords were to teleport into the city at once, they would still be immediately surrounded, overwhelmed, and killed. The only thing that Han Li was wary of was that a devilish ambush could have been set up near the formation. Of course, with his current level of powers, even if there were an ambush, it wouldn't be much of a problem. Aside from sacred ancestor clones, even the average late body integration stage being wouldn't be able to defeat him. The probability of being chased by sacred ancestor clones again was downright negligible, so he didn't have anything to worry about. After all, those sacred ancestor clones had descended into this realm to command the devilish army. They certainly couldn't just wait somewhere just to ambush someone. In fact, there was even quite a low probability that devilish lords would appear here. This was an important point in the devilish army's assault on Deep Heaven City. They weren't going to waste their most powerful beings by making them undertake such trivial duties. Not long after that, the azure streak of light began to approach the mountain range up ahead. All of a sudden, Han Li's expression changed slightly, and the azure light around his body faded as he stopped just outside the mountain, then peered deep into it through narrowed eyes. Blue light flashed through his pupils, and everything up ahead was instantly made clear to him. As a result, he was greeted by the sight of several tens of streaks of light flying toward him in a panicked manner. Behind these streaks of light was a dense black devilish cloud that was giving chase in hot pursuit, and within this devilish cloud were ferocious devilish beasts and weapon-wielding devilish armored warriors. Behind the several tens of streaks of light, there was an elderly man controlling a pair of flying swords, one azure and one yellow, to attack the devilish cloud with all his might. The flying sword shot forth as sword projections that transformed into a giant sword that was several hundred feet in size to briefly stall the devilish cloud. The two flying swords were immensely powerful and seemed to be beyond what the elderly man could wield with his spatial tempering stage cultivation base. With each sword strike that was unleashed, the elderly man's face would pale slightly, and when his face had become completely devoid of color, he opened his mouth to expel two balls of blood essence onto the flying swords. The sword projections unleashed by the flying swords instantly became more dazzling than before, and the sword projections slew a large number of devilish beasts and devilish warriors before they had a chance to evade. After several successive sword strikes, several hundred devilish warriors had been reduced to ashes. This had clearly enraged the high-grade devilish beings hiding deep within the devilish cloud, and a thunderous roar abruptly rang out, following which an inky black flying trident shot forth out of the devilish cloud. The trident extended to over 1,000 feet in length in a flash before hurtling directly toward a powerful sword projection, and an earth-shattering boom erupted. The two clashed violently before the sword projection faded, revealing a flying sword that flew back toward the elderly man. As for the flying trident, it emitted an anguished wail before also flying back toward the devilish cloud, seemingly having been severely damaged during that clash. "How dare you ruin my treasure? I'm going to make you regret ever being born once I capture you." A furious roar rang out, presumably from the high-grade devilish being who was the owner of the flying trident. Immediately thereafter, the devilish cloud surged before rising up to around twice its original height and sweeping directly toward the elderly man. The elderly man's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and he hurriedly sheathed his flying swords before flying back as an azure and yellow streak of light. With the elderly man's valiant efforts in impeding the devilish clouds, all of the disciples had already fled to close to 100 kilometers away. However, the devilish beings within the devilish cloud naturally weren't going to be willing to give up. Fierce devilish winds were swept up, and they continued to give chase. The elderly man pulled out several pills as he flew through the air, and he didn't even bother to look at them before stuffing all of them into his own mouth as he appraised the devilish cloud with a grim expression. He had already been extremely cautious when venturing into the canyon in search of the teleportation formation with his two junior martial brothers, but they still fell into a devilish ambush and were surrounded by 7 or 8 high-grade devilish beings. In the end, his two junior martial brothers had detonated their own nascent souls to severely wound several of the high-grade devilish beings. Otherwise, even he would have most likely also perished at the scene. Even so, they were currently in a dire situation, and it seemed that he was only delaying the inevitable. The flying swords that he was wielding were the most prized treasures of the Xianxia sect, and even though they were powerful enough to stall the devilish cloud, wielding them required a vast amount of energy expenditure, and the elderly man's magic power had almost been completely spent. This was also why he hadn't continued to remain behind to keep the devilish cloud at bay. Even though most of the disciples of the sect had managed to escape, it would only be a matter of time before they were chased down by the devilish cloud. On top of that, this area had been taken over by the devilish army, so unless a miracle were to take place, it would be virtually impossible to truly escape. The more the elderly pondered the situation, the more his heart began to sink. He knew that they were in a virtually unsalvageable situation, but he could only hope against hope that they could somehow be saved. Thus, the group of Xianxia sect cultivators continued to flee, and soon, the edge of the mountain range was in sight. At this point, around a dozen of the weakest disciples among them had already fallen behind, and were about to be engulfed by the devilish cloud. Low roars rang out from the devilish beasts within the devilish cloud, and menacing looks also appeared on the faces of the armored devilish warriors, while the lagging disciples' faces turned deathly pale. The sword-bearing elderly man heaved a forlorn internal sigh before turning around and hurtling directly toward the devilish cloud again. A burst of raucous laughter rang out from within the devilish cloud, following which four burly spatial tempering stage, high-grade devilish beings emerged together. One of them was wielding a black devilish trident. It was none other than the high-grade devilish being that had just repelled the elderly man's flying sword. The other three devilish beings possessed powers that weren't inferior to this devil in the slightest. Just as the elderly man was about to reach the devilish cloud, the four devils hurtled their treasures upward in unison. A giant black trident, two white bone swords, a giant blue sword, and a mountainous yellow brick emerged in midair, then trapped the elderly man and forced him to stop. Immediately thereafter, the five treasures crashed violently toward the elderly man at the behest of the four devilish beings. A wry smile appeared on the elderly man's face upon seeing this, and he could only inject what little remained of his magic power into his two flying swords. A loud buzzing sound instantly rang out from the two swords, and they transformed into a pair of giant sword projections again, then conjured up a thick sword barrier that shielded him from above. These two flying swords were indeed remarkable treasures, but the collective attacks from those four devilish beings were nothing to be scoffed at either. Following a heavy blow from all five treasures, the sword barrier completely shattered, and the five treasures continued to descend toward him with devastating might. The elderly man's face paled even further upon seeing this, and in his desperation, he could only open his mouth to expel a burst of azure light as one final struggle. However, right at this moment, a cold male voice suddenly sounded nearby. HMPH, to think that even a few spatial tempering stage pieces of devilish trash dare to try and kill someone in my presence. Your lives will be the ones coming to an end here. As soon as the male voice trailed off, a loud thunderclap rang out, and a humanoid figure appeared no more than 10 feet away from the elderly man, then made a grabbing motion upward in a nonchalant-looking manner. The five devilish treasures that were descending from above abruptly shuddered before being repelled, as if they had been struck by some kind of tremendous force. At the same time, the four high-grade devilish beings instantly lost control over their treasures, and this was naturally quite an alarming turn of events for them.